Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Suwannee County Workshop for December 13th. At this time, we'll have Commissioner Perkins do the invocation and the pledge, if you'll all stand.
Let us pray. God our Father, we come before you this day, O God. Lord, with thanksgiving in our hearts and mind. We thank you, dear God, for the opportunity to live in this great nation, dear God. We thank you, Father God, for your blessing upon us to wake up this morning, God. We thank you for strength to go throughout this day. Now, God, look on this commission board, dear God. Look on our attorney. God, give us the strength and wisdom and knowledge, God, to rightly divide the truth of God. And God, to make the right decision for this community and for our district and for our counties. And God, we pray, dear Heavenly Father, to look on, dear God, each department, God, bless in the name of Jesus. Look on those that God is on foreign land, dear God, protect and keep them. And God will help you to praise and glory. In Christ we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Please take the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, I'll turn it over to staff. Mr. Ron Meeks, if you would start us off.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board members, I think Commissioner Land had mentioned something about big shoes to fill with saying prayers. I think Mr. Perkins stepped up the plate and hit that one out of the park.
Absolutely. He's way better at it than I am.
No, you do good.
So this is our second attempt at this workshop regarding some land development regulation modification changes. What we as a staff have done is Robin, Mac, and myself kind of got together after that first workshop and kind of went through some issues that we've seen with issuance of these recreational vehicle permits, kind of took into some conversations that we've had with some of the commission. I know Commissioner Mobley, Mr. Perkins, you know, y'all a little bit generally familiar with this process, but just to kind of go back and touch on a couple things is that, you know, we got 2 recreational vehicle permits in place right now. One of them is a 1-year temporary use permit in which someone can use a recreational vehicle while they're improving property or building their home. Also allows an individual, if they've sustained some type of damage to their home, that their home is non-habitable, that they would be allowed to get that 1-year temporary use permit to stay in that RV while the renovations are made. The other one was a recreational vehicle permit, and it is in place for people who own property here in Suwannee County that is vacant, and they can demonstrate a primary residence in another location. It allows them to get a recreational permit, and their occupancy is limited to 6 months in a calendar year. Couple problems we've seen with that through the years is there's been modifications made after inspections are done, which increases numbers of sites that may be available on the property. And sometimes with that, not always do they have a approved septic system that they're tying into. Sometimes it's a homemade system, and it's not, you know, good to the health, safety, welfare of the public. Another thing that's been hard to track is the occupancy. We do have that requirement in there that you have the limitation of the 6 months occupancy in the calendar year. But unless you're standing at somebody's gate knowing whether they're coming and going, it's a very hard process to hold somebody's feet to, and to guarantee that, yes, this person has not exceeded 6 months in their year. And it leaves us trying to validate, you know, electrical usage and what's that look like. So what we've done is we kind of compiled a list of things that we thought we could bring before the board as a working list. This is an attempt. I'm not saying that you got to go with all these. This may be a starting point. If you want to add to, remove, we welcome your comment. That's kind of what this is about. Is why it's a workshop. You know, we want feedback so we can move forward. Where I'm at now is that I know that the board had decided to put the moratorium, you know, on the recreational vehicle permits. They also included the moratorium for the RV parks and campgrounds. I've got some things, later in the workshop I would like to go over with the RV parks and campgrounds, but at this point I want to kind of keep them separately. There are two separate issues. Moving forward, I would like to at least be at the point where we can start drafting the land development regulation text amendment and going through that process at least for the recreational permits moving forward. If we can get a remedy to that, then we can then follow that up with the RV permit, the recreational parks and campground process. Just a little tidbit to throw in there with the time frames of what we're looking at, and we might be able to avoid an extension of a moratorium for the recreational permits just with the time frame. What that looks like is that once we have language that everybody's satisfactory on, we'll draft the application, and that application would go before the Planning and Zoning Board for an advisory decision to this commission, and then it'll come back to the commission, and because it's a text amendment, would require 2 public hearings. So we'll have 1 public hearing, which will be the first reading of that ordinance, and then the second public hearing would actually be the adoption. So that time frame may be able to be completed by the end of February. We might run into the first part of March with that. But with that being said, we'll go ahead and we have prepared a presentation, or should I say our code enforcement officer, Mr. Robin Crespo, this kind of falls in his wheelhouse. So he spent a lot of time and effort in preparing this presentation. It'll come before the board. He kind of took a lot of our ideas and some of his ideas and put everything in a concise location. So Mr. Crespo has some paper documents of the slides that we would like to go through the board at this point in time.
Thank you.
Everybody come see that?
Hey, Ron.
They got it in paper form, so we can.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So the first slide there, we're kind of talking a little bit about population. Everybody knows that Suwannee County is growing, and some general conversations maybe you guys were recently made aware of is our economic development director, Mr. Jimmy Norris, I just in conversation was going through some conversation with some numbers, I guess it was presented, and showing the growth rates in different places in the state of Florida, and Suwannee County's got one of the highest growth rates at this point in time. So those numbers are real. And those numbers that we're looking at, that between April 1st, 2022 and April 1st, 2027, the population growth is expected to average 294,756 during that period. And this represents about 808 new residents in the state of Florida per day. So that's a 1.29% over a 5-year time horizon. So we do have people coming here, and the trend has been residential occupancy is very important to everybody. And it's not always, sometimes people building new houses and buying mobile homes. Sometimes they're looking at what they have and maybe what would be the most cost-effective thing that they can use. And sometimes that ends up being recreational vehicles. They are not designed for residential occupancy. They are designed for temporary use and temporary residential occupancy, for seasonal type occupancy and vacation type stuff, but not to set up as a homestead. These are numbers that I know that everybody on this board is familiar with. Miles of paved roads in the county, 549.42, miles of unpaved roads, 811.97, 692 square miles. Do a little bit of math, that's approximately 443,000 acres in the county. That's a lot of area to cover. And the 3 guys in this room is the ones that's tasked for doing that. So it is a large task that we have. So the next slide we'll go to is our framework. This is some of the items that we looked at and just kind of creating a collaborative effort of maybe what we can look at to get to some type of solution. I think we can all recognize that our land development regulations, however, they are good, but they may not have necessarily been written to deal with the current RV situation. I know that when they were originally written, you know, we had a lot of people that were coming to this community. We do have a lot of people whose destination points here is for recreational activities. We have wonderful rivers here, we have wonderful springs here, and we enjoy those people coming to our community to enjoy those items. And, you know, like I said before, the springs, we have more than anywhere in the world here in this area. So you are going to have people coming here, but the recreational usage has changed a little bit. The following suggestions are some of the things that we came up with, and looking this as a little punch list. Section 4.19.37 of the land development regulations is the section that deals with recreational vehicles. The current language, I believe it actually in the title mentions travel trailers. For us, travel trailers has been an interchangeable word for talking about people with recreational vehicles. It's never been an attempt to be, sometimes if somebody's got a $150,000, $200,000 motorhome, it's almost a slap in the face to call it a travel trailer. But for permitting purposes, that's the way it's been used. So one of the things that we looked at is that we would take a general language of dealing with recreational vehicles that have a current license plate attached to the recreational vehicle may be used as a temporary vacation dwelling allowed on vacant land in the agricultural one and environmentally sensitive areas. Provided, number one, owners must demonstrate a permanent primary residence in another location. That language is currently there. I think that's good language that we keep. Number two, permit shall be used for the owners or owner of the property, no commercial or rental use. This is something that's currently being done in the county, but we don't have any regulations that is referencing that. The intent of the regulations when they were written was to put a provision in place to allow people to use their property for recreational purposes. And now we're in the point in time where we got people that may have these RV sites, but they never intended for themselves to use it. It's being rented out commercially. There's a bunch of sites that are readily available online that have these sites that are listed, and a lot of them, for the most part, are not actually permitted sites. So it would eliminate the commercial usage or rental usage of the RV permit itself. Again, we don't want to confuse any of this with RV parks and campgrounds. That's not our intent in here. This is the general recreational permit for individual properties. The third one there would be the occupancy is limited to 6 months in a calendar year. RVs shall be removed from the property or stored in a completely enclosed building when not in use. Right now, if the RV is left on site, it's required to be connected to utilities when it's left on site. It's kind of pretty bold sometimes to leave that in the open area, depending upon where people live. Sometimes people don't live locally. Sometimes they live several hours away and they leave those recreational vehicles unattended. Sometimes it becomes an attractive nuisance. You know what I mean? So they're broken into, they may be vandalized, they may be stolen. But if the only thing that don't move is the improvements. So the electrical, the water, the septic remain on site. But if we can disconnect that unit and they can either take it with them or have an accessory structure on site, because they would be allowed to have that because they have a permitted principal use of the property, that structure could be used to store that RV. Number 4, properties limited to one RV site. No other RVs may be connected or stored on the permitted site. So this section here would deal with if the permit is for the owners of the property, then they're allowed to permit their one RV on their property so that they can use it for recreational purposes. We want to eliminate the situation of where we've run into in the field where somebody has another RV on the property and we ask them about it and it's just, oh, well, that's mine too, but I just store it. Well, you're not using it. We do have another section of our land use regulations that deals with storage, and it does not allow for RVs or mobile homes to be used as accessory structures, so they can't be used for storage by themselves. So we don't want to have the situation where we have the open storage of recreational vehicles, because now we're using the property as a storage yard. So as long as the RV in question is permitted, that's fine, but we don't want to create the situation where we're storing them on site or having multiple RVs set up that are not permitted. The fifth item there would be the RV must obtain permits for and be connected to septic, potable water, and electrical service. This will ensure, going back to the health, safety, welfare of the county, that we don't have homemade septic systems. We aren't robbing water from somewhere else or power from somewhere else. The people have the availability. If you want to run a generator, you have that. But you will provide for potable water. You will provide for septic. The other side of that is you know, with the advances that's made in solar, people have the availability of putting in solar to run their RVs. That's fine too. That is an electrical service. So as long as we're connected and we have the availability to have functioning utilities there, then we should be fine. The sixth thing there, which is something that's come up on a couple different conversations that we've had with commissioners, is that the RV permit shall be renewed on an annual basis. The RV permit and any subsequent renewal shall be posted in a weatherproof housing at the electrical service for follow-up inspections. This helps us in the field. We need to be able to show up at a site and be able to determine, without having to go back to the office and do research on the property, of whether a site has been permitted or whether the site's been renewed. The annual renewal is a very good idea. I mean, in the past, it's kind of been, if you got the recreational vehicle permit, that recreational permit's good in perpetuity until we place a residence on the property, then that residential usage takes precedent over the RV permit. When we kind of came up with this, we threw around this idea, and I hate to even use the term decal, but we have the availability, and we had some conversation with our our building department program installer, and he works with other departments, property appraiser's office, and things like that. And what we talked about doing is something similar to the way the tax collector issues you your tag renewal, just a sticker, okay? And he has ensured us that he can tie that to our building permit program so that we have the availability to actually print the number on the sticker that corresponds to the permit application. And we can click the box in our program to know that we renewed that. So when that person comes in the month of January, we would like that to be at the first of the year. So from January 1 to the end of January, that would be our renewal month. When you come in and get that renewal, you'll get that sticker and you'll take that sticker. It's just going to be a small sticker and place at the electrical service. The electrical service isn't going to go anywhere. So the owner of the property doesn't even have to be present for us to be able to verify that that's been renewed. Kind of takes that out of the equation. Building inspector, code enforcement office, all with readily available access will be able to determine whether we have a valid permit on the property or whether that's been renewed. And we can color coordinate that for year. The year can actually be printed on it. We have some other options in there with some other decals, but this was the most recent. We just in the past few days had the conversation, and I think that process is already going to be underway. The next section there, starting with number 7, is that we have in there that RVs shall remain road ready and attached to utilities by quick disconnects, no blocking or removal of axles. We want these things to remain road ready. We don't want permanent structures attached to them so that these RVs can be moved off and on readily, easily, within just a few minutes, being able to maybe take up stabilizers and disconnect your power connections and your water connections and your sewer connections and be able to hook up to the truck and pull it out. A lot of times when people set these RVs up and they don't make them road ready and they leave them on property for a period of years, you know how everything gets when you don't have any maintenance on it. You know, it encourages, you know, that structure to become dilapidated. You know, if you got to make sure that that unit is road ready and it's either being moved off the property or in some type of storage building when it's not in use, you're more apt to keep that, that RV, its maintenance may be better. We don't want the removal of the axles, you know, and then that thing sitting out there on blocks. We want it to remain road ready, tires good. That's actually a requirement for recreational vehicles currently, not necessarily in our regulation, but in the Code of Federal Regulation for RVs set up in regulatory floodplains. They're not allowed to sit there and be stationary. They do have to be on quick disconnects, and the service is elevated so that when that flood does start coming, they can be removed off the property. So we don't end up with that thing down the flood channel at some point in time. Number 8 there, the RV permit shall become void when a residential dwelling unit is placed on the property. This would include single-family residential or mobile home. So if you're a person who acquires that recreational permit, you renew that on an annual basis. If you choose to only use that property for recreational purposes, that's fine. At such time as you place a residence on the property, that RV permit would become void and that residential permit will take precedent. That'll be the primary usage of the property. And then that'll eliminate, or the temptation to then take that and make it a rental or something like that on the property. The 9th item there, we had mentioned before that any of these regulation changes that we would propose, we couldn't go back and retro apply them to permits in the past. What we were trying to find is a way that we could deal with situations that become code violations and then be able to make them follow the new guidelines. So we put in there that if a property with an existing RV permit issued prior to, and we would need to establish what that adoption date is going to be if the board so chooses to approve any of these language, is found to be in code violation, any previous RV permit issuance shall become void, and the property owner shall obtain a new RV permit and shall be subject to all the requirements of this section. So that's kind of how we can kind of capture the older permits, that when they do violate, we don't want to I mean, we're fine with the people who abide by the rules. That's fine. We're not here to harass people and get after people and give them a hard time. But when we do have those situations where they do become code violations, we get complaints on them and that case starts. If we have a valid RV permit owner, it's going to become void now. And that person's going to be required to come up to the new standard and bring everything up to code and be subject to that renewal and subject to that new permit to bring their property in compliance. One of the other things we looked at in dealing with these changes to the RV permit is maybe look at amending the schedule of fees. Currently, right now, our recreational vehicle permit runs $250. That's a flat rate fee, and that you pay that one time. And then that RV permit, as long as that recreational permit is valid, it requires no renewal or anything right now. To that $250 fee, we do collect the fire and solid waste assessment, so they do pay that for that recreational vehicle permit. With the conversation that we were having going to an annual renewal, one of the things we looked at is adjusting that recreational vehicle permit. A couple different, these are just options. If we went to a $360 permit, we would want that to be prorated. So the farther you get along in the year, the less you would pay for the initial permit. When January comes, you'll renew that permit at its full value, okay? So if we're at $360 for the permit, that'll reduce that permit by $30 each month. If we move that permit fee to $300, then that fee will be reduced by $25 each month. I think either one of these situations would be workable. The additional fees, we're not here to bump up revenues or anything like that, but it is going to require additional staff man hours in issuance of these permits, clerical type work, field inspections. So really what we're trying to do is capture that additional coverage to the budget and that impact moving forward. The next slide deals with plan execution. As I stated before, what we would do with the annual renewal is make January our renewal month. If by the end of January, our building department program is going to be able to generate a report for us showing who has not renewed their permits. So when we get to February, we're going to issue a first notice by mail. That'll be sent out, letting them know that their permit is delinquent and they'll need to come in and renew that permit. Now, we can do that by just issuing that letter and have them come in and renew that permit fee. At this point in time, we could, just on a process basis, attach a late fee to that for the month of February if we wanted to. Then we'll go into the month of March, where we would send out our second notice if we still don't get a response. And then on the third month, would be 90 days that we're delinquent in that renewal, then that recreational vehicle permit is going to be void. We'll do an inspection at that time, and then they'll have to come in and renew that permit. And then at that time, because the violation would be a code enforcement violation, your permit fees are doubled at that point in time. So if we're beyond the 90 days and we still have not had the renewal, then when they come in to renew the permit, it'll be a double permit fee. Next slide just kind of gave some samples of some barcodes that we looked into, trying to do some type of holograph decal that would be easily seen by people in the field. But one of the things we had most recently talked about with Mr. Kraus, which is the gentleman who is the installer of the building permit program, is an actual printer where we'll have the reflectable vinyl that is weatherproof, and we can actually just stick on the service itself, and it'll look very similar to the tag that you get when you buy your tag renewal from the tax collector's office. And it would be a situation where you can't go and steal someone's decal, because that decal is going to be reflective of that permit number. So if you find a decal on a service and that service doesn't match that permit number, we know we got a problem. So it's not a general blanket, everything looks the same, where somebody can go steal somebody's sticker and move it to theirs, because it's not going to match the permit number for that property. So that'll lead us into the next set of sections that we would like to go over, and I'll turn that over to Mr. Crespo and dealing with the code enforcement. At this time, if any of you got any questions, if you'd like me to go in further to anything that I've mentioned, I'll be happy to answer that if I can. Also, I wanted to add to that is that in the first workshop, Mr. Pravat had mentioned some rewording of the definition side of things to align with Florida statutes, and I'm 100% in agreement with that, and actually have some of the statutes printed out that we were looking at when we were going through this. And kind of what we would want to do is leave the term recreational vehicle kind of broad, and maybe in our definitions, give a definition for that recreational vehicle, but include that the term shall include these things that are listed. And what we would like to see is the thing where we can capture travel trailers, camping trailers, motor homes, private motor coaches, fifth wheel trailers, and things like that. We have another section of the LDRs in the definition that deals with park models. Okay, so the park models by definition under the statute qualify as recreational vehicles, but the only place that we allow park models is in approved RV parks and campgrounds. They are not road ready. They are not designed to be pulled up and down the highway like any other recreational vehicle. They actually require a DOT permit to be moved across the highway like a mobile home does. And they sit on a similar blocking system, a pier system that your mobile homes do. So with those, we would continue to enforce those in approved RV parks and campgrounds and not get those set up on individual properties under a general recreational permit. The other thing in there in the definition that's listed in the statutes that deals with some of these van conversions and some of these slide-in type units. I guess we can look at some of those definitions, but concerns with that is a lot of those vehicles are just sometimes titled as regular vehicles. And some of the trucks have these slide-in campers that go with them, but those campers sometimes provide for an area to put a bed, but a lot of times they don't have bathroom facilities in them, and a lot of times they don't have electrical hookups to them, or some of them have electrical hookups but have no plumbing connections to them. So if part of our process in this is that we're making people, requiring people to put in these improvements so that we make sure that we don't have people going to the bathroom on the ground or digging these cesspools that sit open and things like that, is to maybe not look at those slide campers and things, and that if you're going to do an RV permit, it's got to have a usable bathroom facility with it, plumbing connections and the electrical connections and such like that. So outside of that, that's the only thing that wasn't included in the slides that we went over through the previous workshop. And I just kind of think that a lot of that stuff is already identified in the statutes. We don't have to reinvent the wheel on that, and we can certainly work with the county attorney in that language and those definitions lining up with each other. Questions, concerns, or anything you guys like, anything you don't like, anything you think we're missing?
Well, I thought it was pretty well thought out myself, but I just got where they build a residential unit and then the RV permit goes away, but they still want to keep their RV.
There's no problem with you storing your RV on your property. I mean, it's the same with anything. I mean, there's lots of people that own RVs. Certainly no problem with that RV being on that property. The problem comes if it's set up and occupied. We even allow people to leave it connected to the utilities to run refrigeration and to run that AC unit, because last thing you want to have happen is that thing to get moldy and things like that. We got a lot of people who, you need to run that ventilation. I mean, that's the worst thing that you can do, is just leave it locked up. So having it connected to an electrical service is not a problem. It's the issue of that RV being set up and occupied would be the issue. And that really, I think, is the biggest thing. We'd like people want to run their refrigeration. They may keep drinks and stuff like that in there, so that when they go, they ain't got to worry about it. They connect to it and they pull out. That's fine. That usage is not a problem. That's as long as that unit's in a stored state, we're good.
And, Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I had that same question, but you're saying it's okay for just electrical, not to have the water and the sewer still hook up if they're storing it at their house?
I think it comes back to, is that unit set up and occupied? You know what I mean? I think most of us, you can usually look at those campers and see whether they're set up and occupied, and whether they're in a situation where you've got it set up for somebody to occupy. I mean, very seldom do we have a situation where somebody leaves it hooked up to a septic. There's really not the need for that. A lot of times they may come in and hook up and dump and then disconnect that. If you just got the electrical hooked up, Mac has seen that time and again when he's out doing inspections, and the people clearly live in the residence, and it's just a situation that you're leaving that AC unit so it can come on, and you're providing that pull in of fresh air, so we don't create a habitat for mold and mildew and things like that.
My only question on that would be, like at Christmas or Thanksgiving or something where they got family coming in and they're just using it for that one-time deal, for some people to stay there during a holiday or something. Is that an issue as well? Or?
That's a situation where we're not giving you permission, but if it happens.
But it's easy enough. There are a number of different counties that have an exception like that follows around with that. That if you're here for a 1 week period of time, or a 2 week period of time, to be able to do that. There's language we can insert if you want to have that exception in there.
There's plenty of my family I don't want in my house I'd rather put out there.
Well, I think the intent behind it is that, there's always that temptation that if it's, it's there and it's not being occupied, then there's always, I might as well get some use out of it, so I'm going to charge somebody $400 or $500 a month. Well, that's not its intent. You know what I mean? That something outside of what Mr. Pravat mentioned, you got, certainly it's Christmas, it's Thanksgiving, you got family members down. That's fine. I mean, we can massage that language how we need to put that exception in there. Like I said, the intent behind any of this is not to go after people, is to kind of put a set of regulations that I think we can all be comfortable with and that everybody follows, and kind of goes behind, and it's like, you know, the follow-up behind that, and I know that I kind of maybe left some of that out, is that if we're renewing these permits on an annual basis, we're going to have to have some follow-up check behind that. It's really not a situation that we can take all of, let's say we issue 150 RV permits this year, that we can't renew those 150 RV permits in January and then go out and look at those 150 RVs real quick. But what we can do is, you know, typically what Mac does when he does his inspections is he sets up a route. So if we're in Three Rivers, for example, and we know that we've got multiple RVs that are RV permits that can sometimes be issued in certain areas, then he can pull, like say for the year 2023, give me those 10 permits that are in Three Rivers, and when I'm down there doing inspections, I'll go and check and make sure that we don't have manipulated electrical services, or the site that we permitted for one RV now has 8 sitting there. Make sure we don't have those issues. But because we've got that sticker out on the service, doesn't mean that Mac or Robin has to have interaction with the property owner. It's just a quick pull up. They got their sticker. We got one site here. Everything looks good. We go on about our business and go on to the next site. And we can kind of pick those follow-up inspections on our normal daily routes anyway. If we're at a situation where we're slack on a permit day, Mac only has 6, 7 inspections or 5 inspections for that day, maybe he pulls some of those RVs and goes and looks at them.
What about a lock gate or no access to the property? What do we do then?
At that point in time, if it's a lock gate access, then we would be left with our notification. You know what I mean? That, you know, we had you know, you may need to contact us to set up a time. It's kind of the same process that your property appraiser's office works with. If they encounter a lock gate, they usually leave a note, let the property owner put the burden back on them. It's their responsibility to contact us, set up a time where we can come back and re-inspect, follow up with that.
The $360 permit fee, that doesn't include the garbage or fire
It does not.
assessment?
That would be the recreational vehicle permit itself.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Land?
to what you just talked about visiting on under your book on tab 10, I like what Franklin County wrote. I think Mr. Pravat may have shared this with us in our booklet here. It says travel trailers may be occupied for short-term durations not to exceed 14 days when visiting premises furnishing adequate toilet facilities. So something like that in our LDRs would accommodate those guests that are coming to visit family with a travel trailer. If they want to park in the backyard or something and sleep there, but use the facilities inside the house, allowing them to do that for a short period of time. I mean, I think that would be good. And then secondly, you talked about assessments. How this doing the RV permit sticker process, would our software, your software, speak to the property appraiser's software to, I guess where I'm going with this is
Tax collector too.
Well, this is the thing. When you come in to get the initial permit, the way it is now, we collect the assessment.
right, prorated or in full?
It's prorated.
Right.
It's currently prorated.
But my thing is like, so these permits are allowed for 6 months, up to 6 months, right? But we're collecting a prorated assessment, but the permit is good for perpetuity. So how are we collecting that 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th year assessments?
It's on the tax roll.
Okay,
So we collect the assessment with the permit to make sure we get it. We're 6 months in. You pay a prorated amount right now, and you only owe till the year's end. So the farther you go, the lesser it gets. Those permits then get sent over to the tax collector's office, and they pick up that assessment. That's a new assessment now. So when that person gets their tax bill in the following year, that assessment is on the tax bill.
prorated.
No, it's the full amount. It's full amount.
But I guess my question would be to Mr. Pravat, is there any violations there since they only have a permitted use for 6 months? Are we get in any trouble by charging a full rated annual assessment?
The answer is no.
Okay.
But it's a practical aspect of it when you come back around. If you're going to do the permit for a 6-month, period of time, you have to police what that period of time, is going to be. And let's just say that I walk in and I walk in July. There's 6 months left in the year, and I can get a 6-month permit. But if I walk in July, I'm only paying $180 for the second half of the year, that type of thing. I think we need to, tweak on that just a little bit about, and somebody like myself, I'm not going to be out in the hunting woods in January or February. If I'm going to do something, I'm not going to start until May, when it's warm and you can play golf close by.
Well,
So,
the thing of it is the prorated point of that was, let's say you come in November. We don't want to charge you the full $300 permit fee for 2 months, because when January comes, you're going to pay that renewal, that annual renewal. Right. So if we're on a prorated amount, if we're 6 months in the year, if our normal fee is $300, let's say, and then you're month 6, you're only going to pay $150 for the remainder of the year. But January 1 comes around, it's an annual renewal now. So now you come back in and you pay the full $300. So we're only going to capture the prorated amount in the year that you permit. The following year and any subsequent year thereafter is going to be the full amount.
Okay.
Also, and Commissioner Land brought it up in Franklin County for construction site storage. I see they have some language in there for theirs. Travel trailers may be used and occupied as office and equipment storage facilities at a construction site of any properly permitted construction or building.
We have that language currently in our LDRs with our 1-year temporary use permit. So it states in there that it even includes mobile homes, travel trailers, recreational vehicles can be used, as temporary residential, temporary office, or anything like that for construction purposes.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Land.
can we, just a thought, I see a lot of new faces here, and can we jump into the code enforcement side so that some of the folks in attendance can see how we got here or why we're here with some of these issues that we're facing in the field?
Like I said, the code enforcement component, Mr. Crespo, our code enforcement officer, is going to handle that component of it. And just want to mention that the attached pictures aren't made up. They are from Suwannee County. They are from legitimate cases, so we can see firsthand what we look like in the field. Okay.
I wanted to share
My name's
what we're seeing out there.
My name's Robin Crespo. I'm the code enforcement officer for Suwannee County. And I'm not going to take too much of your time. I appreciate that you guys are letting me speak here, and I really appreciate Ron and Mac allowing me to put together this presentation. And Lynn, you helped out a lot as well. Thank you. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be able to put this together. In addition, just want to say thank you to both of you guys for really helping me out. They're like the best wingman you're going to have, and I appreciate you guys, really do. And I do a lot of inspections with Lynn, and she's awesome in the field. And I really appreciate her and her temperament out there as well. All right. So I'm going to just kind of briefly try to bring you into my world. You probably won't want to stay for very long. I'm going to actually pass this around to the audience so that they can actually experience and then circle it back up to you guys. But the first picture really tells it all. And if a picture can say 1,000 words, this says 10,000. It is. And I think it's important that everyone understand, even as Ron was speaking, we're not looking for the family member that's coming down during Thanksgiving. In fact, I don't think we work Thanksgiving. So we won't be in the field anyway. So I don't think we work around Christmas. We won't be there either. Like, that's not the person we're looking to have a conversation with. What we're looking at is this. This is what I see in the field. Again, as Mr. Meek said, these are field photos. This is actually what we see. None of this is made up. So when we're talking about RVs, this is what I'm seeing out there in the field. You don't see a lot of this because it is behind gates. It's tucked away in the woods. You drive by, you don't know it's there. I find out it's there because someone calls and complains, says, hey, I've got this neighbor, they've got garbage packed, piling through. I've got rats now, which there's photos in there, just so you know, some rat photos as well in there, and I need some help. And then I go in, and this is what I'm seeing. So it's really important that you understand what I'm seeing in the field in order to grasp this. The next slide here is my caseload. One of the things that I've only been with the county now going on almost 6 months, and this may seem like a lot, it may seem like a little. I think that there's a way that we're doing it now, which is community-minded, and I don't think we have to lose that aspect. I don't think that we have to go around and lose the aspect of treating everyone as if they're our neighbor. And I think some of you know, because you've gotten calls about me, that we don't do it any other way. At the end of the day, this is somebody that is our neighbor. We're going to treat them with respect, and we're going to focus on the violation, not on the individual. Right. So, but my current caseload, I've got 65 cases to date. I've closed 40 of them. Most of these are done in the field. Mr. Land, you got garbage on the floor. How long do you think it's going to take you to clean it up? He tells me 14 days. I said, okay, good. I'm going to give you 21. I'll see you in 21 days. Oh, thank you so much. All right, see you in 21 days. But after 21 days, and I come back. Our current process, though, we then send a second notice and a third notice. I have some samples here for you guys. Here's basically closed, but you can kind of flip through and see what these folders look like. Here you go, sir. I want to make sure you get the right one. This one's especially for you, sir. So the process is lengthy. There's a cost associated with it. It takes time. It's an arduous process. And that doesn't mean that we have to take the friendly out of it. I think we just need to take the drag out of it. Currently, we're sending 2, 3, 4 notices, and it's costing us as much as $20 or more just to mail because it's certified mail. Remember, when I go out, I'm building a case against that person. It's a legal case. I'm documenting. I'm taking photographs. I'm interviewing them, and ultimately, I'm going to end up back in this room to prosecute. That's my job, right? So, out of the 65 cases, I've got 25. I've closed 40. I've got 25 that are active, and that's a deceiving number because the reality is the new caseload is behind there running. Now, there's only 168 hours in a week, so God's not creating more time. There's nothing I can do. I can only manage that time that I have. So if we don't streamline this process, like Mr. Meek said, we're never going to be able to carry or cover the 700 square miles in the county. It's impossible. Even if we had, 10 people out there, it's impossible. So part of this is we have to streamline the process. And we've only had one case go to court, and I have 8 scheduled for next month. They could have gone this month, but again, because of the holiday and understanding that, this is a sensitive time for people, we scheduled everything till mid-January to handle those cases. So this slide here points out that there's 4 different cases or infractions that we encounter when we're dealing with an RV. The first one is care premises. That's going to be other abandoned vehicles. The RV itself is abandoned. You'll see trash throughout. A lot of the times it's because there's no trash decal associated with the property. The power source is altered. And you'll also see that they're non-road ready, and there's photos in there to show you what this stuff looks like. And the worst one, which is something I really want to hammer home today, is number 4, which is unpermitted septic systems. You can see this is a care premises. This file is actually up there. We've been working on this case, and it's tremendous. But when you look at Section 162 in the Florida statute, it actually gives permission for the county to be able to go in and remedy the situation. And some of these cases, I think, are so bad that we may have to actually look at that being a possibility. I'm at about 6 or 7 complaints at this point from the surrounding neighbors. I've tried to keep the heat down. I try to explain to them it's a long process. I try to explain to them that we're working on it. But I don't think the person is capable of getting themselves out of it at this point. So plan of execution on care premises. To streamline this process, we look at Section 162. And in that, we have to give reasonable notice. And I gave you an example by using Commissioner Land as my example. Sir, what's a reasonable time for you to clean up? And people tell you 7 days, 14 days. If someone says, oh, 3 months, I'm like, no, we're not doing that. The most time I have is 30 days. So I'll bring them back. I'll walk them back to what's acceptable. But I let them give me the date. And what we do now is that we show up, and if it's not done, we do this song and dance, and it goes on for longer and longer, which is fine, but we're never going to be able to attack the entire problem and size and scope that we have to cover. It's impossible if we continue with the process. So the code allows us to be able to do that inspection, say in 7 days I'll be back. If in 7 days it's not taken care of, or in 14 days, or in 30 days it's not taken care of, then we issue a fine and we issue a court date simultaneously. And then they deal with the magistrate in terms of paying that fine. And if additional fines are deemed acceptable, then the magistrate can make that determination at the magistrate hearing. So care premises, again, garbage removal, we give them 30 days to correct it. We set that court date, and then I would suggest that because it is garbage, minimum offense first time is 100, not maxing that out. It could be 50, could be 75. But something that allows people to realize that if I continue to do this, if I continue to dump my garbage, this is going to cost me a lot of money, and I'm not willing to do that. This is power source altered, and Matt can speak a little bit about this. This is an actual photo. This is sewage going out with brown wires on the floor, and I think the woman is wearing flip-flops. When something like this happens, the process is we contact Mr. Hinkle. He issues a stop work order, which we included inside of these documents, which is in the statute, and we immediately shut that power off. We give them 24 hours to do so because it's dangerous and risky. But again, the way that you stop this, the way that you build good enforcement is to let people know that if you do these things, if you alter the power, if you manipulate the RV site, if you do these things, there's a cost to you. So again, we show up, Mr. White, I see that you have 7 RV sites here. You're only permitted for 1. You have, 1 week. You have 24 hours to remove that. Obviously, it took you a while to put them in, get them out, and in 7 days I'll be back. If they're still there and you're like, oh, well, I only left 2 because, I didn't really understand you, sir. Here's your fine. See you in the court. You can explain it there. And what that allows us to do is go to the next inspection, to the next inspection, to the next inspection. So again, with power or electrical connections, it's dangerous. Our reaction is immediate. I've been on a few of these with Mr. Hinkle. He does a phenomenal job. He does it with care, but he gets right on it, and we get those removed. I know he has an example with him that he can circulate as well. I can pass those out. All right. But again, if you alter the power, then there should be a fine, and because it's dangerous,
Thank you, sir.
It should be the maximum allowable fine. Okay, this is where it starts to stick for me. I'm going to give you a personal story. I grew up where the river had refrigerators floating down it. It was brown. It was disgusting. And I remember being a little kid saying to myself, well, who's responsible for this? A, I wondered who the person was that threw the refrigerator in there, and B, I wondered where are the adults to take care of this? And I remember feeling this way at about 7 or 8 years old. When I came down to Suwannee County and I saw the river here, I was like, I have to live here. This is going to fulfill something, from my childhood. And to sit there and watch my children swim in the river, it's priceless to me. Okay, it's healing for me. When I see this, and again, I'm not an environmentalist. I'm not a tree hugger. Not that I don't believe in cutting down all the trees. I mean, I'm not that guy. But when you see this is about health. This isn't about anything else. This is about your health and my health. And when you look at this, and thank you, Lynn, for helping on this. We have 85 limited use wells in the county. These are wells that when you go to church, when you go to public settings, and there's multiple people that are drinking from that water source, okay, the state comes in and says, well, you need to test it because Mr. Franklin, he can't go over there and verify whether this or you've been doing the right thing, so the state steps in. And if we spread out these 85, and just so you know, gentlemen, it's on the back of this presentation right here. You have all the data on the back here, okay? It has all of the data there. Here's the interesting thing when I looked at this. These 85 wells, they're addressed all along. So you got 92nd Trail, 160th Street. You've got one on 72nd Terrace. You've got Highway 129. You've got, where else? We have County Road 250. We have County Road 49. We have County Road 137. That's Mr. Mobley's district over there. You have US Highway 129, Road 41, 41st Street Road. What you see is that these are spread out. But here's the alarming statistic. In 2021, there was a 42%. When they tested these wells, 42% of them in the first quarter were all positive for fecal matter. Think about that. So now you've got these spots that are being inspected because they have to be. But what about the next door neighbor? You think he's not positive? He's not being forced to be inspected because he's not using this limited well. That onus is on him. Now, what's even more alarming is when you look at 2022, all year long, 23% of these wells out of these 85 remain fecal matter positive. And what's scarier is that's a 475% increase from the year before. So if you don't think we have to do something today, you're wrong. It's scary. And this is a huge problem that's coming down and no one's seeing. It's the shadow coming in the dark because, again, this may be anecdotal, but what's causing that? What's the reason? When I look at my photos, here's the reason. Look at this next slide. Now, it may look like this is a collage, but this center slide here, the one right here, that's their septic. That's the river. So you want to know why you have these results is because of the things that we're seeing in the field. Fecal matter positive, this just reflects, again, this report. You can see it in the graph, all right? The data that is provided there. So plan execution. Again, if you dump direct sewage on the ground, it creates an immediate public health problem. Immediately, it's a public health issue. It is a destruction of habitat. It's also destruction of sensitive resources, which is our drinking water, our potable water. Okay, so guess what happens then? All the gloves come off because we don't need to notice you. You immediately do this, you're in court, and that's where our stance should be. This is what's running behind the RV problem. This is not your mobile home person, okay? This is not your permitted RV person who's here for 6 months on holiday and then they go back to Wisconsin. That's not who's doing this. It's the person that you're seeing in these violations, that this is what's attached to it. So they're not taking care of what they got to do. And again, even those that are doing the right thing, going through the state process of the inspections, right? They're testing positive for fecal matter. Sorry to be, I told you guys wouldn't want to be in my world when I was done with this. Direct on the ground, our response should be, you have 24 hours to remove that violation. If not, maximum allowable fine, $250 first offense, and you immediately have a court date. That should be our stance on it. Not road ready. This is an interesting photo. If you look deep in the dark corner in the back there, that's an RV. This is major glamping here. This is on another level. They have an entire structure that is built, and when we look closely at it, nothing in there was safe or up to speed. Ron had talked about this. You know, what we're seeing in the field is that again, if you really want to grab hold of this process, Again, don't look at this as this is the person who's doing the right thing. That's not who we're focused on. This is the person that is, again, you've got to look at the photos. Care premises, they've altered the power. They're dumping fecal matter in the back. They've blocked up. Like, this is what we're dealing with, not the person that's permitting and doing this the right way. That's not the person we're dealing with. And then what you have to realize, if you don't take action, it's affecting all of us. It's affecting our health. It's affecting our drinking water. And how long do we let this go on until we just become, to what point? When? When is enough to know? Like, what more data do we need? All right, I hate to be the downer here. But again, having this road ready, so again, streamline the process is really important. And how do we streamline it? Again, we go out, we do the inspection. Sir, you need to correct that within 7 days. Ma'am, you need to correct that within 14 days. Ma'am, that has to be 21 days. I'll be back in 21 days. We set the second inspection. If the violation is not clear, we issue a ticket, we issue court date, we move on to the next violation. It's the only way to cover this entire county. You're talking about 700 square miles. If we stay in this process that we have now, if we don't use the regulations the way that they're set up to be used, we will be stuck in this place where we'll never be able to tackle this. We've got to get to this, and this is never going to go away, but we've got to at least bring it to a place where it's manageable. We've got to get the pH balance back to at least palatable, right? I mean, we're never going to remove every violation. That's not the goal. We're just trying to get this, we're trying to get this to a place where we can stop it and slow it down to a point that it's manageable. There'll always be code violations. Every county has them. Every state has them. It's what happens when you put a community together. It's just what happens. Just like every day there's speeding tickets. I mean, it's gonna happen. But we got to get to a place where, you know, when you turn off of 90 and you're headed into Wellborn and you're coming down that road, you know the police officer's there sometimes. So what do? You slow down, right? That's the type of, you want to be able to. We know these guys are in the field. We know that they're diligent. And if I do this, the talk of the town is I'm going to be fine. You know you can't do that. If you dump that sewage, they're going to come. They're going to find out. The first fines, it's expensive. They're serious about it. So what do we need? We need to revise the budget. Currently, the budget that we have is for $100,000. And what's interesting about this budget doesn't take into some of the things. It's not a budget that's curtailed to what we're seeing in the field. Just the notices alone. Remember, I'm prosecuting a legal case from the day that I go out there, from the moment I take a phone call. What's your name, sir? What's your name, ma'am? All of these things are being documented. At the end of the day, this old budget that I have here, when you look at what we're paying for postage, it says here postage is $500. Our postage, if we just run 1,000 cases, is $24,000. Because it's a legal case. It all has to be sent notices. You know, you're prosecuting this violation. So again, I reran some of the budget numbers. I'll be willing to share those with you, but I outlined a 5-year plan. Time management, that's what we've been talking about. Get out there, see the first violation. You got 7 to 10 days. If I come back at 14 days or 10 days, that's it. It's not taken care of. You go to court. So we set up, 12 court dates throughout the year, and we just move through the process. Again, remember, we're focusing on what you're seeing in these photos. That's what the problem is, and that's where we're focusing to clean that up. Administration, we need somebody that's dedicated in the office. I spend probably 15 to 20 hours typing legal notices and documents because, again, it's a legal process. We need me in the field and less behind that computer. The good thing is that almost in 6 months, I've created every document possible, I think. Well, Ron's going to come up with something tomorrow. He's going to be like, and this notice you haven't seen. It's like the golden notice. In the field, we need additional people. I don't think we have to look for full-time people. I think this is something that can be handled. Again, if we have that tech in, we can have somebody that's 2 part-time people. I know that it's been thrown around that the town of Brantford would like for us to step in and help them out. So, and I know that we've had some talks with them, and they said that they would put a budget behind that so we can capture additional help and use that person to cover Brantford and help us in the county. This is real important, FACE certification, which is Florida Association of Code Enforcement. I've got a unique background, which makes me uniquely qualified, but that's not normal. You know, I can do a legal notice. I have contract litigation stuff behind me. I've done community service work overseas for 10 years. I've done community development. So I've got a real unique background that allows me, I've done design. I mean, I haven't done everything, though. I know you're looking at me. What up? But getting someone certified so that when they're interacting with the public, and this is what's most important, they're interacting on your behalf. Remember, the complaint, you're the commissioner, it's going to come back to you, right? They're going to say, well, this person hasn't, or hey, I've got this problem, or down the street there's a car, or this person. And I know that Mr. Hale, I know that there's many complaints that, not many, a few complaints that you and I have dealt with, and they've come through, right? And then you refer them to me, I take care of them, I follow up with you. You know, you've got to have the right person that's able to interface with the community, make sure that they manage this legal process the right way, and don't get the county hung up in legal lawsuits or anything like that. So that's a real important factor. The good thing is once that person's trained, we want to make sure we retain them, but once they're trained, that cost dissipates. And then safety protocols and equipment. This is a true story. Went on an inspection. I saw the guy. It was actually the first inspection that Ron took me on. Drives around and he's like, oh, this is by my church over here. This guy, I think, is sleeping on a mattress outside. I said, oh man, that hurt. It just didn't seem right. Everything about it didn't seem right. And we saw the mattress there, right? So as I went around this part of the county, I would often look over and look for this gentleman, and the mattress became a small, I don't know what that was, metal villa. That's nice for a small shed on wheels, but it didn't have windows, so then the bed had moved in to this shed that was on wheels without windows, and he was sleeping in this place with no door and no windows at night. So again, it was tugging on my heart, and I wanted to find this guy, and I wanted to help him. I really did. I finally did find him, and we started helping him, and we helped him along the process. And his English wasn't really good, and we tried, you know, to figure things out, and so many folks were taking advantage of him along the way. He had told me that people were robbing things from him. So again, on my rotation, I would stop by and see if Mr. So-and-so was there. Well, the one day I go there and I see a car that I've never seen before. So in my head, I think this guy's probably, this is what he's talking about. Now the mobile home's already been there, but it's not tied down. So no one should even be in that mobile home, right? And the way that it's jacked up, it's about 16 feet off the edge. So this thing looks like it's about to just go down the hill. So I climb up this makeshift ladder, and when I go in there, there's a woman there. And I said, ma'am, where's Mr. So-and-so? She says, you don't belong here. I said, ma'am, this is an unsafe structure. I know the property owner. You don't belong here, ma'am. I need you to exit the building. She says, I've been raped on Monday. Now here I am in the building. It's about a 9-foot drop. So I'm thinking, if I got to jump out of this building, this is going to hurt. And I don't know what to do. And I can't think fast enough. And what she does is she dips into the side of the room. I can't see her. She goes in there. And it was in that moment I realized, I'm like, I could die doing this job. It's serious. She came back out with her cat. But that moment I was paralyzed. And she was yelling at me, and I was just standing there. I said, wow. I climbed out. I called dispatch. Max showed up. I didn't eat dinner that night because I realized that I could have died that day. It could have went really bad. And this goes back to training. This is why you want to have folks FACE certified. You want to have them safety certified. It's the reason why you may see me walk around with a vest. I know Ron says I'm the snooper, but the reality is I wear a vest for a reason. I know that there was a case that was just prosecuted a couple weeks ago where someone shot at Miss Lynn Touchton, one of our inspectors for state. So it's not you and I that would do that, but it's the woman that was raped who is mentally unstable that could do it to you. It's the unstable ones. And you're asking me and other people, right, hopefully there are other people, to go into these areas, and you can see the photos, okay? And it's not the folks that are there. Like I said, I deal with the violation, not the person. But there are times where the person's not mentally stable. And in those cases, it becomes extremely dangerous. And we need to be properly certified. We need the right equipment. And we need to be able to go out there with the right attitude. And I think we can accomplish that. I really do. But I need you to be mindful of all of these things. So the budget that's there is real. I can go over it with you. I can show you the process on how I got to where I got to. Just going back, these are Ron's notes in an easy pull-away, so you don't have to walk around Commissioner Land with 100 pictures, and you can just take out the last slip. The 5-point verification system is in there as an idea of how folks can verify that they are actually living somewhere else. And then the unpermitted RV violation process, it cites the 162 code and the revised budget just as a snapshot so you folks can look at those numbers. And it takes the old budget and retrofits it to where we need to go. And sorry if I took a little bit too much time, but I hope that I got my point across. And what I really want to leave you with tonight is that if you don't take this serious and do something now, you're going to be up, you can fill in the blank creek, no pun intended, but we will be floating in it. And if we get ahead of it again, if we put a budget that's respectable in front of this, I'd rather pay that amount of money than pay what it will cost to clean this county up in 5 years from now, based on the average population that's coming in. It will cost you a hell of a lot more money.
Do you find children living in these conditions when you go out and like some of these pictures?
I actually have not. I have not engaged any children in the field yet. Shillings, but I didn't see the children. There was a child there? Okay. Well, and here's the thing. At Shillings, I wasn't focused on the children. This was another situation. A gentleman, he had tattoos. There's nothing wrong with that, but he had them on his face. There's nothing wrong with that. But it adds a little bit to the character. He went in, he had no shirt on, then he came out, and I could see the imprint on his shirt, and I could see that he'd gone in, and now he was getting frustrated, and he was saying, you know, that BITCH, I don't like her, and you respect at least the she. And I said, okay, de-escalation, Lynn, can you just sit in the truck, finish your report? And I pulled him off to the side. I said, sir. I said, look, between me and you, I said, you know how those environmentalist people are. I said, but, I mean, you know, how long do you think it'll take you to get out of here? Because when they come, they're coming with guns, badges, and everything else. He says, I need at least 2 weeks. I said, all right, I'll give you 3. All right. Now, I saw, and I can see the imprint. I'm like, all right, listen, don't worry about it. Take care. I leave, I get in the car, I couldn't drive out fast enough. And I'm like, Lynn, we almost died. Oh my God. But those are real stories. So I didn't see the children because I was focused on the gun. But yeah, it's real. But any other questions? Hopefully that was enlightening. And again, the photos, hopefully they made their way back. They are all real. And I actually didn't pick the best ones. I saved that one for the next meeting. Thank you, folks.
Well, I just want to say something, Robin, while you're standing right there. I appreciate what you do. I know me and you've had a couple we've worked on, and I appreciated how you went out there and dealt with them. And it was it's probably one of those pictures there, but you roped off like a certain section, and you give them so long to clean that up. You went back out, roped off another section, give them so long to clean that up. And I just thought that was the right thing to do. So.
And sir, I don't think we ever lose that, right? Even though you streamline the process, I think there's always room for a gray area. I think you always have a human touch. And a case like that, you know, you give it your best, but that case is actually the one that we need to really sit down with because it's got some entanglements with legal challenges. But ultimately, they're not capable. So we have to make a decision. We either leave it or we do something that we've never done before and we clean it up and send them the bill. But this is we've never had. I mean, this is new territory, so we've got to develop different tactics. And again, it's a lot to chew on.
Well, it's not just our county either. I've noticed in other counties I've looked at, Taylor County, Dixie County, they're all facing the same issues, and they're all in the same process we are in these RVs and trying to get a hold on it. So it's not just Suwannee County.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Yes, sir.
I do appreciate everything Robin does. It took a lot off my plate when we hired him, so appreciate that. But we've had this conversation multiple times, and that I mean, I don't have to go through things, guys, but I mean, I have a full plate and always have. And I was put in a situation where we would kind of have to deal with code enforcement issues on a part-time basis, and it went that way for a long time. So we're looking at around 10 years or so where we were in that situation. So with a good, productive, positive plan, we would like to feel like we could come out of that in maybe 3 to 5. But we got to start somewhere. So when we look at some of these land development regulation changes, I've tried to, it seems simple because there's just not that many, but I've tried to overthink it because I've worked with the county for 24 years. I've been in the zoning department for 20 of those 24 years. Before that, I was in public works. So I've kind of had a big circle of experience through the county. So I try to think of all the things that I've ran into in the past 20 years in dealing with certain violations and code questions that's come up regarding RV permits, and just trying to address them the best we can. But I guess in saying that, we give a lot of thought to it. In that any change that we make, we want to make sure that those regulations are reasonably able to be enforced, and that we can possibly think about unintended consequences behind any of those. Whether that means, like Robin had mentioned, whether that means an amended budget down the line, whether that means adding manpower, whether that means time frames regarding those. But that we just don't make a regulation and that it is what it is, but we're going to have to execute that plan too. And we want to make sure that we're within those guidelines. As far as the recreational vehicle permits themselves, do we feel like we have a starting point for that from just a consensus from the board? Is there something else you'd like us to look at? Is there any other ideas that you would like to see, or would it be better if we put this in a format of like it would look when we generate an application, and we take those sections that need to be amended and get with Mr. Pravat and the definition modifications and make sure everything looks clean, and then maybe bring that back to the board and have you give us a consensus on that? I'm just trying to be cognizant of what we need to do and not have this situation drag on where we have to keep extending moratoriums and stuff. I know that we have other people that are looking to do permits, and just in general conversations with people who've come by the office, and they're kind of like, do you have any idea of which direction you want to go? And I've told them all, I said, I've never had a commissioner tell me we want to get rid of recreational permits, but we want to have better guidelines. And I've kind of went through some of these points with some of these people asking these questions, and I've not had one say those are bad, we don't like those, or that those are not reasonable. Every one of them's been like, hey, it sounds good, it sounds fine, we're okay with that. So we just need a little direction of where we would like to go from here.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Lamb.
Thank you, Mr. Meeks, Mac, Robin, you guys. All this information is fantastic. I mean, I'm pretty much good with what you've laid out here for us. There's, one thing that we need to do is we need to get with Mr. Pravat and clean up the language on the travel trailer, RV, clean that up. And that's not really, that's kind of out of your hands, but on the permit thing, it's not good people that have a problem with it. And not that the ones that are violating are bad people. Maybe they're not financially capable of doing some of the things that, that we expect or what. But, I see realtors in the room. I've had the calls from the septic tank folks. I mean, I don't want to drag this out any longer is what I'm saying as well, because, we're affecting other people. This is one of these unintended consequences from making their living. So I don't want to extend the moratorium any longer than we absolutely have to, because, I've gotten the calls too from landowners in my area that have moved here that are good people that are, wanting to follow the rules. They're just ready for us to release what the rules are so they can follow them, whatever they may be. So, I want to expedite this. I think we got a good starting point with what y'all have laid out here with these 9 recommendations. If by all means, if Mr. Pravat thinks any of these need to be tweaked to follow Florida statute, then absolutely, let's not break the law. But the fee system, that whatever you guys think on that. I do want to see it renewable, because I want that permit issued once and it's good forever. I feel like that's where a lot of our violations have came in, because we don't have that right to reinspect. And I'm not a fee person. I'm not a tax more guy, but for us to go out and reinspect, there's a cost for the county to actually go out and do that, whether it be the labor, the fuel, the vehicle, the paperwork in the office that follows it. There's an expense to that. And unfortunately, like anywhere, a few bad apples have caused a problem that, that's got us looking at this, because I think all 5 of us have had the complaints, of the guy that's taking advantage of the system, and creating some of these photos. But I think you've done a really good job at laying this out. Hopefully the folks that are here tonight can understand where we're at. It's not that we're wanting to take away property rights. I think every commissioner on this board you own it, you do what you want to, but we also got to protect the health of the public. And that's kind of where my thoughts are. Expedite this, and let's get something set in stone so we can make those amendments with Mr. Pravat, and hopefully he can expedite that on his end too, and get these folks back to one, making a living, and these folks that have bought property here, and I don't know where they're staying, but maybe some of them bought or about to buy, and we're hoping to live in their RV the right way, and we kind of put the brakes on some of their plans. So I'll be mindful of that.
I think we're at the point where, even if we have a good base idea of where we're at with the items, like I had included with the email, just letting Mr. Pravat know that, to cover ourselves on the legal side, if there's some language that needs to be modified, that we can still keep the intent. We know where we're going. I think we're safe to say that, we can work on that. And correct some of those definition stuff, because anything that we do as far as definitions isn't going to be anything outside of the statute, so we're not going to create any legal situation. As far as the fees go, the LDR text stuff that we're going to be amending isn't even going to be able to be adopted before the first of the year. So we have time to look at those fees and amend that schedule, because that'll be handled by a separate resolution by the board. Like if we went from where we're at now at $250, we are increasing that fee $50. We're just really trying to capture the additional manpower and hours that are going to be spent in the process. And for the most part, if we can, what we discussed internally is that when we issue these permits, that these potential enforcement processes be outlined for these people, so that that when you come in at the first of the year, that this is what I'm going to pay as my renewal. Let's not get to the delinquent permit. Let's not get to the late fees. Let's not get to the double fees that are now code violations. Let's take advantage, like most everybody does with property tax. Let's pay it early and get that discount. You know what I mean? Let's not get to the point where we're having to I don't want to feel like we're out trying to attack the people. You know what I mean? But there has to be a consequence to the decisions.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Hill.
And I do appreciate what everybody on your staff has put together, Mr. Ron. And like Commissioner Land said, we do have some other folks here from our community. I was just wondering if any of them had anything to say about this or any suggestions.
What I was going to ask if anybody wanted to come up and speak so we can get your side of the story.
Come to the podium.
You can just come to the podium. We need name and address for the record on this too.
Please, sir.
Name and address for the record, please, sir.
Billy Golightly, 1683 151st Road, Live Oak. I've been realtor in the area pretty close to 15 years now, grew up in Suwannee County. I have been to some of the properties and seen some of the things that I've seen passed around in pictures, so I do understand the need for some code enforcement, for some attention to those kinds of issues. I do have a concern that we are over-regulating the issue. I mean, I heard the gentleman say he's got 65 some cases he's working on now. In the grand scheme of things, for the number of residents in Suwannee County, the number of electrical meters in Suwannee County, 65 does not seem like a big issue to make this whole other additional level of bureaucracy for new people and existing people to deal with. You know, I mean, we're talking about having to write into code, you know, the allowance for somebody to stay in your own camper at your house over a Thanksgiving or Christmas vacation, which to me is kind of incredible. But I caution you guys on kind of taking this approach that you couldn't cure maybe with some additional code enforcement positions, time, whatever. I mean, everything I saw in the picture passed around could have had a code violation as the law is now, as all the rules are. So why are we adding this whole additional level? I mean, you're talking about printing off decals and putting them on meters. You know, what if the landowner is not here to put the decal on the meter within the 90 days? You know, you had people didn't travel for months at a time during COVID and whatever. A lot of these places are owned and operated by people that are not here in the area. It's their vacation places. So, you know, I understand the intent. I see and understand the reason for, you know, the discussion, but golly, y'all, it seems like there's got to be an easier way to address this without just going tactical on the whole situation. So that's my 2 cents. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Steve Fontana, 21181 144th Street, Live Oak. Yeah, I'm concerned that you're heading Suwannee County into an HOA, because that's what I see happening. You know, if you're going to put a permit, if you're going to take a few violators, you can take some code violations, and then you're going to build this big bureaucracy around it to permit people to use their own land in a certain way, that I can't. That's not why I moved here, to be honest with you. So I caution you against that for sure. And I also caution you against just looking at pictures. You really need data. Were those 85 wells, were they shallow wells or were they deep wells? There's a difference. You know, there's ways to do things correctly, and if you educate people, this is how you build a proper latrine that can be composting and that can be environmentally friendly. There's ways to camp on your property that's off the grid living should not be illegal. You know, scientifically you can do it. You know, I say you educate people more and deal with the code violations and let people use their property. You know, because the minute you go down this road, then it's, okay, now it's RVs. Now you're going to want to come in and expect the electrical work that I've done, you know? And I can read the National Electric Code. I can make sure it's up to code. And if an electrician looks at it, he's going to say, yeah, that's correct. But you want to police that on me? You know, I don't think that's where you want to go. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I appreciate the comments. I really do. Really wish there were other ways. They've been explored. I mean, really, you don't have to take the pictures we've shown you to be the gospel. Every commissioner up here has rode around their district plenty. I think each one of you could probably have as much experience as we have had in the field and things that you've seen. In reality, I mean, you can drive down almost any road in the county and find these things. And that's the problem, is that, you know, years ago, I don't think it was such an issue, but we've had a large influx of people into our community, and it's we'll go into the next topic, going into the RV parks and campground side of things. But we have some of those same issues that we run into with these RV parks and campgrounds. I didn't want to intertwine them because some of those same requirements are not there as far as demonstrating residency elsewhere and things like that. But right now with our RV parks and campgrounds, we don't have an abundance of regulations regarding them. They're just listed as allowable uses in agricultural 1 zoning districts and commercial highway interchange zoning districts as available special exceptions that with a proper application and site plan as a public hearing that goes before our zoning board of adjustment for approval. It kind of becomes like the flavor of the week kind of thing, because as I said before, I've been in the zoning department for 20 years. And for several years, I never saw any applications that came before us for RV parks and campgrounds. I think for several years, the only one that was on record was the Spirit of the Suwannee Music Park, and that was done sometime in the 90s when they actually, you know, started adding sites out there. But we never seen applications come before us for the types of applications we have now. And then it progressed into this, and then we started asking questions. And you know, after 2005, we had, you know, a lot of people coming here when the market was good, building houses, buying properties, doing these recreational permits, and they've kind of been steadily growing throughout the years. And now we've seen an increase in the RV park and campground application. I should have counted exactly how many we've had this year, but it's probably around the 10 mark, I would say, that we've had within maybe the past couple of years, 10 to 12 that we've had applications for. Now, there have been certain approvals that's been given, and then there's been different directions of some of these properties. Some of those sites have not been built out. Some of those RV parks and campgrounds that were approved were pretty large. You know, one of those being located at the I-10 and US 90 interchange, which is now part of a different economic development project. But that land was intended to be utilized for the development of a pretty large RV park and campground in excess of 400 sites. So that was pretty intense development there. Just in a little conversation I had with a local RV park, just trying to get an idea of some of the occupancy, because we do have in the county certain RV parks and campgrounds where there is residential usage going on. We can't be blind to that fact, and the owners of those parks know that. So I asked him, I said, what's the average rate that you charge per month if somebody just come in and said, I want, you know, a month rate? And it was like $150. There's nowhere you can get a mortgage for $150 a month. There's nowhere you can find rent for $150 a month. So we're creating these havens where you're having these, in reality, mobile home parks that are not mobile homes. Recreational vehicles, by definition in the statute, they are not residential dwelling units. They're for temporary and seasonal occupancy. So we allow that avenue for that recreational permit. We allow that avenue for that recreational vehicle park and campground. But we want people coming here that are visiting the things that we have here, not coming here and setting up residency. Especially in an RV park and campground. I mean, Robin's prime example. Robin is a property owner here in Suwannee County, and he has his home here now. But to get here, to get the transition to Suwannee County, he was staying in an RV park and campground for a week or two and then going back home, all the while making improvements to the property, bouncing back into, because it was cheaper than buying a hotel, cheaper than finding an Airbnb. But what we're having is these people that are, their stays are being extended. So what we tried to do is look at some regulations regarding RV parks and campgrounds. Again, conversation. We're starting from scratch on this one because we really don't have any regulations in place other than some minimum square footage requirements for RV sites in an approved RV park and campground. So a couple of the questions come up that I wanted to kind of go through the board and look at is something like a required distance from existing RV parks or between RV parks and campgrounds, something the board may want to look at. I know some of our surrounding communities have some language in place. I think even Lafayette County, if I'm not mistaken, has a 5-mile separation between RV parks and campgrounds to give a little bit of distance between those. I know Commissioner Land had brought up the fact that because these RV parks and campgrounds can be a very contentious application, as he saw firsthand at our November meeting. Our zoning board meets at City Hall. Mr. White used to sit on our zoning board. He's been involved in some of those meetings. It was standing room only. And in all honesty, it was the angry mob mentality. There was the applicant and his engineer and everyone else that was against it. There was not a single person that was there that night that was going to stand up and speak in favor of that RV park and campground. So because of that, he had made the mention of moving that RV park and campground special exception to the special permit list that allows that application to go before the Board of County Commissioners at that point in time. So thought process would be take the burden off of the Zoning Board of Adjustment, looking at dealing with those, and give it more to the commission. And we can do that by simple text amendment and rerouting where that application goes. Looking at some of the other areas of the state of Florida and how they reference these approvals for RV parks and campgrounds, I noticed that some of them limit the intensity or establish an intensity the same way we do density, and they do so in two factors. They look at primitive camping, and they set an intensity for that, and then they set an intensity for the full RV sites. So just for example, one county I looked at had an intensity of, for primitive camping, was 4 primitive sites per acre is their intensity. And then on the intensity side for the full hookups, that would be your water, septic, and power hookup sites, they had an intensity of 8 RV sites per acre. I'm not saying that's right for us, but that's how they handled it. So, you know, just looking at some of the sites, and I'll use that site that was withdrawn as just an idea. I think that was around a 20-acre site, and I think he was proposing 51 or 52 sites. Okay, so that's maybe two full RV hookups per acre, just around in that general vicinity, you know, 2 to 3 sites. So maybe we look at establishing an intensity for primitive sites and an intensity for full RV sites. These are just ideas. We looked at also some of the things that they had in there that they were dealing with their park models. They have a limitation of a certain percentage of the overall site being dedicated for the park models. So if we have a 40-acre site, we maybe put a 10% intensity in there, so that maybe only 4 acres of that 40-acre site could be used for the park model cabins. But trying to establish something like that, because we get the question asked a lot of times, and a lot of times it takes coordination with the environmental health department, because the question's always asked, well, how many sites can I have? And it's basically, the answer is, how many can you support? Okay, we got to have, you don't have utilities, you don't have a centralized water and sewer system, so everything's going to be serviced off a private water well and septic tank. So we got to know, how many sites are you going to put in? How many sites can you service per septic system? How many sites can you have and meet your setbacks between your well? Okay, so a lot of times that takes coordination with the environmental health department and laying out a site plan and saying, okay, well, you can have X number of sites per septic system based on this acreage. Maybe you get 50 sites. Maybe you get 100 sites. Maybe you get 60 sites. Whatever that number is, it's kind of open to what you can, service. So it may be better for us to look at an intensity so we can sit down and talk to somebody and say, okay, well, if you've got a 50-acre site, this is the maximum number you could have. It doesn't mean that that's maybe what you ask for. Maybe you want less than that. But at least be able to have some numbers that we can throw at somebody and say, this is basically the maximum availability of sites that you could have based on this acreage. Again, looking at an intensity limitation for the number of cabins. Do we want to discuss certain setbacks that would be required for RV parks and campgrounds? I know the board always has the flexibility to add anything in an approval as far as conditions go that they warrant, whether those be setbacks, whether those be buffers, landscaped areas, and things like that. But you do have certain setbacks that are already established in your land use regulations for other uses that has been deemed to be intensive. So if we do have some of those setbacks that pertain to RV parks and campgrounds, when somebody's designing a site plan, those things can already be put into place. So that when you get something coming before you, you actually see some of those real numbers and what those may look like and what the actual development of the site would look like. Look at maybe putting some prohibited uses in there, some language that states that permanent residential usage is prohibited. No usage of the site, tents, RVs, cabins, structures, or facility for residential usage. Maybe some type of occupancy limitation of 90 consecutive days with a maximum occupancy of 180 calendar days. The 180 calendar days matches our recreational permit that we're limiting with 6 months. So again, we want those things to be road ready. We want them things to be movable. We don't want porches and decks and screen rooms attached to these things sitting in RV parks. Don't allow them to set up residency in the RV park and then permit a storage building in there. So that's not property that they own. We want that stuff to be, it doesn't mean that the campground itself can't have these storage buildings, but don't let people put them in there for these sites. If somebody wants to put in a storage building or something like that for their occupants to use, then that can be treated as an accessory use, but not people permitting things in there. Some of the other RV parks that we have in the county, we have different types. We have ones that cater to festivals. We have ones that cater to the traveling public. We have ones that cater to the equestrian community. So we have a variety of different types of RV parks, but we don't want to encourage the residential usage and the setup of that residential usage in those RV parks and campgrounds. Another thing that I had came across was that some of those communities limit the placement of these RV parks and campgrounds into areas that access collector or arterial roads. That way we don't have these rural dirt road communities that are tucked back in the woods that are hard to get to. And fact of the matter is that the cost of some of these recreational vehicles today, people don't even want to drive down dirt roads with them, so they want to come off of main highways. So I did see in certain situations that certain communities limited those areas and those approvals to RV parks and campgrounds to be off of collector or arterial roads. So those are also things that we can look at. Not necessarily asking for a definitive answer on the RV parks and campgrounds because this is relatively new. This was not included in our very first workshop. Just kind of wanted to throw some of these things out there as a food for thought. If any of you guys got any ideas right off your head that you were thinking of that were concerns of yours with RV parks and campgrounds, we're certainly receptive of those. This type of stuff, I would like, if we're going down the track that you would like us to see, then we can continue this. Again, with this language, we can work with Mr. Pravat and make sure that we're in line with, where we want to end up, and then bring something back to you that you can actually look at and get a consensus on that if we want to proceed with those amendments. If you don't want to do anything and leave everything the way it is, then we'll proceed that way. If you just want to move the approval process behind it, we can do that too. So if I'm way off base with the stuff I've provided you, let me know. I won't waste any more time on it, but if you want me to work on something else, I'm receptive to your comments.
I don't want to see a county full of RV parks. So And if spacing them out or arterial roads is the way to do it, I would be good with that, but I would want you to keep looking at it and looking at other counties, if you will, and seeing what they're doing and try to bring back something for us to look at that maybe some other people is dealing with.
Well, I mean, like I said before, I don't want to give the illusion that I'm overthinking it, but even through the RV, the regular recreational permits, and as well as with the RV parks and campgrounds, I've seen some language that looks good from other communities, and I've seen what they've tried to capture, but I also see that it is virtually impossible to enforce. And I think that that's the unintended consequences that I want to avoid. I don't want to spend the time and effort bringing something before this board and having you adopt it, and us going through the process of the public hearing to ultimately have something we can't do anything with. And I think that that's going to be a failure on all of our parts.
Agreed. Any other comment from you guys?
Mr. Chairman, no, I think that, continue down the path you're on as far as coming up with some parameters. I mean, our requirements now there's 2 requirements, very loosely written, and with I don't know if it's the economy or what, but with the influx, like you said, we've seen more RV park applications in the last 2 years than we saw in the previous 8, 9. Maybe that's the economy, maybe that's COVID. I don't know what that is, but the arterial roads, like you talked about, because I think the fire chief, he's here. These folks have accidents too. If we got a 100-unit campground way tucked back in the woods and they need 911, I want our guys to be able to get there quickly to potentially save somebody's life. So not only access for the tenant, but our guys to get there too. But yeah, continue down that path and draw something up and get with, obviously keep Mr. Pravat in the loop so that when you do bring it back, he's already on board with what you got, and then maybe we can move forward to the hearing side of things.
Mr. Chairman, I agree. I think we need more information on it. I think we all need time to do our own research a little more in depth as well. I know I do. But I don't disagree that we need to take a closer look at it for sure.
We set a moratorium on both, did we not?
You did.
And 90 days, I think, is what we did. And then we re-upped the RV to coincide, so they're both running at the same time frame. I'm not as concerned about the RV parks taking longer than it does for the special permits for the RVs, the temporary RV permits. That one, I'd like to get on moving with it, and if the board's on a consensus basis of what they put forward tonight, which I will say was a very informative, very nice put together.
I have a question on that. I was going to ask Mr. Ron, out of these 9 requirements here, some of these look very familiar. It appears to me, how many are actually, just for public knowledge, how many are actually new and how many are just kind of honed in on and sharpened the knife on?
Well, the main one that is consistent is the limitation of the occupancy of 6 months in a calendar year. That actually is some positive language, because when we were doing some of the research, we found other communities that had that. I think that the intent was to be 6 months, but the way they worded it was that your occupancy would be limited to 180 consecutive days, which in reality means that I got to move my RV for permit or my RV for 1 day, and then I can go back for another 180 consecutive days. And so we see the problems that would have. Then that basically encourages the residential usage of that recreational vehicle. So that limitation of the occupancy to 6 months in a calendar year, the demonstration of the primary residence in another location is currently in the regulations. Robin and I had some discussions on the verification behind that, because we do find people that not everybody owns a home. Somebody rents a home. Somebody stays in an apartment. You know what I mean? But if we had some verification that is that person's, we got some type of a contract, some type of, government documentation, some voter's registration, something somewhere else that we can show that this person does have residency elsewhere. But that's currently in the regulations, the 6 months occupancy in a calendar year. A lot of this other stuff that's in here has been enforced that way for several years, but not necessarily with the black and white backup documentation to it. We're taking into consideration that you have language in your land use regulations which states already that recreational vehicle permits are not residential dwelling units. Some language that we rely on heavily is in every zoning district. It lists allowable, permissible, principal uses and structures. Typically right off the bat, number 1 and number 2 is single family residential, mobile home, okay? So if we come up to your property and you're clearly using your recreational vehicle for residential purposes, the land use regulations already do not provide an avenue for that to happen, okay? It is not listed as an allowable, permissible, principal use or structure. So therefore, under the prohibited uses, if it's not specifically listed or by reasonable implication permitted herein, it is prohibited. So that's kind of the catch-all language. So cleaning up that language and putting this stuff actually in there helps us on an enforcement side of things and helps keep people on the straight and narrow. Again, I mean, it's not us trying to over-regulate. It's like a lot of this language is in a roundabout way already provided, but it's like, let us come in and put it in a bullet point format, A, B, C, D, number 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever it is, and go forth that way. Because at the end of the day, if you're living in your RV, there is no permitted allowance for that anyway. It is not defined by the state of Florida as a residence. It does not meet Florida building code requirements as a residence. It is not under a manufactured home requirement as a mobile home. It is not either one of those. So in our land use regulations, it would be prohibited for that to be used for residential purposes.
I got a question, I'm sorry, Ron, on not so much campers, but these sheds that I'm seeing pop up everywhere, are those?
Same thing goes with those. I mean, is any structure that is, we go back to occupancy, okay? We can go down to any of these storage building companies you want to, Elite, King, Shed Galore, any of them that you want to go to. Any of those buildings have a data plate on the inside of that structure that certifies its occupancy. States right on the plate from the state of Florida, occupancy, storage, utility, okay? So if you're buying that building, you buy that with the knowledge that that structure is only certified for storage and utility. It does not mean that with proper engineering that you cannot change the occupancy of that building with anything. You know, if you've got a commercial building, you want to change it to residential. You have a residential building, you want to change it to commercial. You go through the proper engineering, you can have that occupancy of that structure changed. And in doing so, anywhere that structure is deficient in the building code, because we're not dealing with a manufactured home at that point, we're treating it as a single family dwelling. So anywhere it's deficient in the Florida building code for residential occupancy has to be brought up to code. Now that would include floor plan layouts, engineering diagrams for plumbing and utilities, water, foundation plans. They can sit on concrete slabs. They can be put on pier systems similar to mobile homes. I may be speaking out of my expertise. Mr. Hinkle is our building official. and the wind load requirement. You know, so a lot of those structures are open shells. They're not insulated. You know, so they got to come in and insulate those and meet those insulation requirements that are designed under the Florida building code. We've had several people that have done that. I think some people have ended up on the good side of things, and some people, we've had one lady, she came out, she said, you know what? She said, I like the way the structure looked. I really thought I was going to save some money. She said, but it's always that square peg in a round hole kind of thing. You're left converting something that was built for one thing and trying to change its occupancy to something else can, at the end of the day, cost you more money than had you started out just building what you wanted. You know, going back to our former building official, Pat Sura, had made the comment a long time. He says, you can build a house in the middle of Walmart parking lot if zoning will tell you you can. And you can turn a chicken house into a house if you wanted to, as long as you follow the building code, And there's a lot of truth behind that. I mean, it doesn't mean that you can't do unconventional construction. You can. It may cost you more money in the long run when you think you're saving $1. But there is the avenue that you can change the occupancy of the building. But if you do not do that and you end up occupying that structure for residential usage, then that is residential occupancy of an unapproved structure, code violation right there. Mr. Hinkle can speak to that a little more. None of those structures meet ingress and egress requirements. Those windows and doors are certainly not residential code compliant. And people sometimes are on us, well, why can't I do that? It's like, well, we also have to have a conscience behind this thing. And if, there's a reason why windows are required in residential bedrooms and things like that. If there's a fire at night, you have to use that as an emergency exit. And if you don't fit and you can't get out of that window with its height off the ground and the size of that opening, then if we allow that's on our conscience. That could be loss of life.
So where I see them, you'll see them at places, and I know by statutes you have to have a complaint in order for us to go look at that. So how eventually do you root that out if they're already scattered all over the county? I see them everywhere.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, we can't take anonymous complaints, all right? And we just can't go out and generate arbitrary complaints to people, all right? But if Mr. Hinkle is at your property inspecting your electrical reconnect, and he shows up and he sees this brand new delivered storage building, and it's got bedroom, you're in there doing construction of beds, and you got a couch sitting out there, then he has an obligation under his license at that point in time for the health, safety, welfare of the county that he has to address that. He then becomes the complainant. He's the license holder of that. Same thing with Mr. Hinkle. If we come upon something, you have an obligation at that point. Even though you might not have got a complaint, I become the complainant at that point in time.
Which we have had items just like that between myself, Ron, and Robin. We have found issues to where Robin would go out on a called in code enforcement complaint, happen to be on the property, and I'd have to end up going out with him because he would acknowledge and see there were other violations that weren't affected.
I'm just wrapping my head around all of it. Back to the RVs here. I know we talked about it at the last workshop, like the weekend warriors, if you will. Does the 6 months take into consideration for that? The folks that, I don't know, just say you live where you live, but you own a piece of property on the river. Mm-hmm. You want to go down on the weekend, pop your camper up, take your family down.
Yeah,
and be wild for the weekend.
Because the limitation would be 6 months occupancy in your calendar year. So from basically January 1 to the end of December, okay. If you choose to go to your RV site and stay for 6 months, that's your choice. If you choose to go and stay every weekend or every other weekend, or just come and stay during winter months, or just go stay during summer months, that's your choice. But your limitation would be 6 months in a calendar year. You exceed the 6 months, then that's deemed to be your primary residence.
Gotcha.
Which is where the proof of residency comes in.
Right.
Correct.
In another location.
Yeah. Would a power bill from another location suffice as?
It can. Proof? I mean, but you also want to make sure what is that power bill tied to? Absolutely. You know what I mean? Because you can show up with an ag service that I just got for a pivot irrigation and say, well, that's my residence. Well, there's got to be something attached to that. We need a mailing address or a contract or something that you're paying a bill, a utility bill or something in that other location that corresponds to a residence. I mean, most of the time, we're also getting a copy of driver's license. State law requires that you keep that current, so it's kind of hard for people to kind of sneak around that. But we want to make sure that, in addition to that license, that we're getting verification that we have a primary residence elsewhere. A lot of times you can have that overlapping of a person comes in to secure a permit and gives the illusion that they have a primary residence elsewhere, all the while there's a real estate contract on the sale of that property that's going to sell next week.
Yeah.
We don't know that, you know. But, you know, that same documentation is going to be required when you come back in to renew that permit. You're still going to have to show us that verification that everything's current, nothing's changed.
Also, on number 9 there, if a property with an existing RV permit issued prior to and it's blank is found to be in code violation. So I guess that's a decision we're going to have to make as far as where we start with this.
That would be the date of the adoption of the ordinance that would be pertaining to those text changes. So that would be inserted there with that ordinance.
So what I'm getting at is people that's already got these recreational RV permits from back, however far back, how are we handling this? Is it going to be
We can't go back and address those.
grandfathered
I mean,
in?
they're
Well, that's what
grandfathered in prior to that other rule. I mean,
I disagree with that to an extent.
Mr. Lawyer.
well, I would state that there's no way to capture those people.
Well,
You know what I mean? Because all we have available for a digital file is maybe late 90s forward regulations, and this rate requirement has been in place since 91, 92. I don't think that I'm not saying legally. I would question legally. You're the expert on that. If you can retro apply those rule changes. However, how can we in reality go capture those? And that's what I don't know.
and that's something we can explore if you are interested in retroactivity. Because I would think that what you would want to do with those people, even if they have the past permit, you want to be able to identify them. That somehow we have to back up and get them so that, going forward, if we're going to have a permitting process, that they ought to be captured in this system. I mean, that's my personal opinion mixed with my legal opinion there. How's that?
And the flip side of that is that we only keep building permits for 10 years. So anything prior to 10 years is somewhere shredded. So, I mean, we certainly can capture things on our new building permit system. We have no way of running reports or anything on an old system. It's just used for reference. And a lot of that is not even complete because it will show us whether you generated a application, but sometimes sometimes a permit was generated, but we a lot of times can't verify the inspections behind that. So it really is I don't even know where to begin with that. Prior to the new building permit coming in 2014? Anything prior to 2014, I don't think there's any way we can capture that.
So any recommendations from staff on this?
You couldn't,
Nine
Mr. Chairman, you couldn't cross-reference. I mean, surely the property appraiser, someone's going to have some type of document stating that. I mean, but he's going to have an assessment of the unit there, so then you could maybe get with him and determine if that unit is a mobile home or a.
They don't assess the unit.
They're not.
All it shows is if there's an improvement on the property. So you may pick up a well, you may pick up a septic. You have no way of knowing whether that septic or that well was permitted for a repossessed mobile home or an RV.
I guess he's not here to ask. I was just curious to see if he, on his actual building improvements, if he indicated what it was. I know some of them would say shed, or does it say camp? I mean, camper's not assessed.
A camper is not assessed on there.
couldn't do that.
If it's a recreational permit, they show improvements on the property. If it's a well, if it's a septic, if it's a power pole, but the actual RV itself is not assessed. It's a licensed.
Because it pays a tag fee because it's mobile.
I was just thinking out loud.
Yes, sir.
Well, when you say going back and capturing them anyway, is that to charge them the renewal fee to make them renew every year so we know where they're at? Or is that just we're not worried about from a certain date back, we're just going to let it go and you catch them in the process of code violations or whatnot, and at that point then it becomes a re-inspection?
That's why we put the language in there, was like, how can we try to deal with these things from the past? recognizing that we can't go find them all. But if we do come up on one of these permits that we can kind of do a little bit of research on and by reasonable implication see that there is a permit on, and because there's always going to be a reason that there was a septic, okay?
Yeah.
Well, there was going to be a reason of why there was an electrical service there. So if through the course of action and available records we have, if we can see that there was a recreational permit issued there, we can kind of get a pinpoint of a time frame. And then if that's a violation, we'll deal with that violation and say, okay, well, you might have had a recreational vehicle permit that was issued in 1997, but now you've went in and manipulated that electrical service and you've put in 4 sites which were not approved. Because they have, since the regulations was adopted, no one has been able to permit multiple sites on a residential piece of property outside of it being an RV park or campground. So we're not going to run into that situation of, well, you permitted it. No, we didn't, because it's always been one site. So if we come up on those things where we can verify that there is a code violation, then we'll start that process. So any previous permit that existed is voided. You're going to start from square one as if you're a new setup.
And when you say that, starting from square one, is that a reinspection of electrical, reinspection of the septic tank?
It would.
The
We
whole
would start a
thing?
whole new deal. If they have a septic, then they'll have to go through the environmental health department, get typically a pump out and reinspection to verify there's no failures in that system. And we will get septic approval based off of that as if we are a new setup. Same thing as if you get a mobile home replacement today. Just because you have a septic there doesn't necessarily mean that's a good septic. So you have to go through that process of getting it pumped out, a letter of recertification, and then the environmental health department will give us that septic approval, and Mac will go out and do an inspection on everything. Is the electrical good? Have we manipulated the electrical? Do we have our water connections? Do we have our septic connections? And then you'll be on schedule with everyone else to come in January and renew your permit.
Well, I'm of the feeling, and always have been, that if you give me something as a government, don't come back and take it back from me. So in my thinking, you were to be grandfathered in for whatever you had. Then if it gets caught in a code violation or whatever, I thought that was pretty smart to do that. So at that point, it becomes null and void. Now you're gonna have to go with the new way of doing things.
I tried to treat it the same way we do with, like, we have non-conforming uses of land. Okay, so if we have a non-conforming use and then that rule changes, that use is grandfathered in. If that use ceases for at least 12 months, then you got to come into compliance with whatever rule exists today. So I tried to take that same approach into this and say, well, okay, how are we going to deal with these if we get violations on these old ones? Well, we'll void that permit, and now you got to come into whatever standard everybody else is doing today.
I'm good with that.
I'm good with that.
Well, I just want to try to move forward with this as much as we can,
Right.
so we can get this process going. We're
That's
not
pretty-
delaying it any longer.
That's pretty much all that I had to present, unless Mac or Robin has anything they want to add. I appreciate the opportunity of bringing this stuff to you guys. I mean, my wife don't even know what I do for a living because I try to explain it and she just tells me to hush. So, a lot of this stuff is not something that people deal with every day. I know it's not the most interesting thing in the world, but in reality it has to be dealt with. And we want to see people to continue to enjoy our community and enjoy our county. I am also for people being able to do what they want on their property. I'm a big property rights person. But just because you have the right to do everything on your property doesn't mean that you have the right to affect my property, okay? So I think that within reason, if we're following the law and we're making sure that we're following the requirements for septic and proper disposal, and we're providing for potable water systems, and we're not going outside the intended uses of these RVs, I think everybody'd be happy. I don't think that, anybody that I've encountered that's questioned anything about these, no one has indicated to me that it would have any issues of making an application for that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Meeks, how is that? I know the state has somebody we're talking about with the 5-year on septic tank inspection. If that's so, how that playing in with the inspection of these existing permits?
That may be outside of my expertise. I may want to defer that to Mr. Waldron.
Yeah.
If he has any information on that, then I will let him address that to the board.
Gary Waldron, Suwannee County Health Department. Rephrase your question again, Mr. Perkins, please.
There's with 5-year inspection of the existing septic tanks, I know the state was going to be mandating that. And if that's so, how would that play into inspection of these existing permits that they can go out into to inspect those RVs that they are up to par?
There's current legislation that's been considered that's going to happen, that every 5 years you'll be mandated to have your septic tank inspected. And currently that plan requires the Department of Health to do that. However, understand there's already passed legislation that the Department of Health, who is responsible for the OSTDS, which is on-site sewage treatment disposal systems, that part of our operation of Department of Health is being transitioned to the Department of Environmental Protection. And we're in year 2 of a 5-year transition plan. So that means, and the two agencies are working through that plan on who gets what staff, who gets what equipment, where will they be housed, how will they be located, how will they be supervised, what's the permitting process going to look like. So to give you a government answer to your question is, we're not certain at this point.
I know at present that your pump out inspection guys are going out there and inspect those tanks, make sure they are having the right baffle, no cracks into them and all those type of things. So with that, would that be included all into this 5-year deal, right?
As I understand it, the 5-year inspection is going to be on every septic tank system, that it would be required to be inspected every 5 years.
Okay.
But there's a lot of transitioning that's taking place, with a lot of trying to work out who's on first, who's on second, where's third, and nobody's covering home.
And there's a lot of opposition to that over in Tallahassee as well.
Well, this was driven by the legislature to transition the septic tank program over to DEP, but there are some concerns of the 5-year inspection requirement.
Right.
Moses Klepper, 14581 102nd Path, Live Oak. My information is kind of mixed because I've listened to all of it, and I got a couple things. When I came here, my property was wooded. I didn't have septic well, electricity, and I wound up having to go over to the most feasible place for me to go with my RV. I have a motorhome over to Casey Jones in Lake City. That was about a 40-minute drive each way for me to get to work, clear my place, get a well. So I'm in favor. I'm like Commissioner White. I don't want to see those RV parks everywhere. The one down 129 just opened up, Green Acres or something like that. It looks pretty, aesthetically okay. I wouldn't like to see one every 3 or 4 miles, but there was a need. I don't know. There may have been one hiding somewhere I didn't know about. Anyway, that's what I have to say on that. I heard someone say about after 6 months after 6 months use on these RVs, personal RVs, that they'd have to be put in a storage. Well, I'm actually in the process of building like a pole barn attached to a garage. I'm in the process of building too. So I'm not personally going to be involved in this, but some of those RVs aren't worth what it costs to build a building to store them in. And I don't know where all the details are on that. I don't like eyesores. Y'all heard me over and over. I want this county to stay pretty, but also I'm with a couple of other people that got up here today. I don't want to see overreach of government either. So where the balance is, I don't know. I haven't heard, and I'm ignorant, like a quarter-acre property, I don't believe should have the same restrictions. And most of the county's unrestricted anyway, but if there's not code or something, I guess, applied to the whole county. But I would think, in fairness, a quarter-acre property would have less availability to store a RV on it than a 20-acre property would, right? I don't know how y'all gonna work that out, but I'd hate to see somebody with a 20-acre piece of property where they would have to build a daggum building to store a $20,000 RV, you know? Put 10 in to store, it don't make sense to me. Now, could you, like in the particular neighborhood I'm in, we don't have a HOA, but when they were trying to construct the HOA, they put in the code or whatever it is, the restrictions that, like the storage buildings had to be in the back of the property with a setback and all, you know, trying to keep things decent looking, you know, and that didn't come through. But anyway, I don't know the answer. I wish I'd come up here with some answer. I heard some really good things, but I also hear some overreach. And I think jumping for 250, 360 is y'all gonna have to go to Coliseum again with the next meeting if you do that, you know. And I know that's only gonna affect the new people coming to the county, but new people coming to the county are gonna be people here permanent, you know, a lot of them. So I don't think we want to like offend people right away or just seem like we're money grubbing. So an increase, adding staff, I could see some increase, but I mean the 300, it doesn't hurt my ears near as much as jumping to 360, you know, and it ain't gonna affect me either way. But I think that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. Name and address, please, ma'am.
Hi, Stacy Daychuk, 17858 89th Road, McAlpin. I'm a realtor, so I just need a few clarifications. He already asked the question, the barn issue. So lots of times we sell customers, they know it can be recreational. Now we're saying that it has to be in a completely enclosed barn. Some of these customers are coming with quite large RVs, still movable, still every day. So we're now telling them they're gonna probably have to add another 70 grand to their budget with the building materials of the barn it's going to take to house this RV when they leave it. And then there are the weekend warriors who are coming every weekend. So you're telling them on Sunday when they leave, you need to unhook, put the unit in the barn, Friday, get back, unhook the unit out of the barn, rehook it up. It just seems like, how are we even going to regulate this when we have so many issues? Trust me, that paperwork's pretty good for the things I've seen. I mean, I'm in the county every day. I've driven almost every road out there. There are some places that absolutely need code enforcement. Those people probably don't even have an RV permit. So we're gonna take, the question is what am I gonna tell my customers going forward? Because there are people I've sold land to who cannot get a permit for an RV, who 6 months ago were gonna get a permit for an RV, who were gonna stay here this winter, and now they can't stay here because they don't have a septic tank, they don't have a power pole. So the questions are, you know, when is the moratorium going to lift? Because our county does need this influx of money. I mean, sure, we still want to have this nice area, but it brings money to these are new jobs. These are new jobs.
Absolutely.
We need to open up the land for these people who are paying for these new jobs.
Well, that's why we're trying to speed this along.
Right, so we just need to know, you know, is the barn, is that gold? Like, we've got to have a barn because if that's what you're proposing.
Well, I think it was only a barn if they built a residence, wasn't it not?
No.
So again, I'll go back and state, probably my first line of this deal was that this was a working list. This is a workshop. The Board of County Commissioners are not making any laws tonight. The process behind this was some proposed language. The language she's referring to is that in the, I think it's
Number 3.
it's the one that talks about occupancy limited to 6 months in the calendar year, which is already in place. And then we had tried to include some language in there that would deal with security measures to secure that RV, as well as creating some aesthetic situations better in the county that, you know, you just don't have RVs littered all throughout property. So if the RV is not in use, most of the times that what we've experienced is when people come in and get the RV permits, it's not very long before they want to build a pole barn over the RV, or they want a concrete slab to park the RV on because we don't want to track in mud and things like that. So they're already doing a lot of this, but we just put that in there to see if the board would like to go that route as we make it a requirement. If the board don't want to do it, we strike that language, and it's not part of the deal. No one's making a decision tonight. Even if we left here and put this in a proposal, it's going to go before the Planning and Zoning Board for an advisory decision, and then back before this commission for 2 public hearings for an adoption. So this is a list that we would work from. You guys don't like the language, we strike the language. I work for you guys. You make the rules. I'm the legs out there doing the work.
I have another question on this too.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so this happens sometimes. So say we have a customer that already has existing property here. They have sold a house somewhere else. They don't know where they're going. They want to get an RV permit here until they decide, are they building on that property? Are they going to buy a new house? So they no longer have a residence. They own land, but now we can't use the land because we don't have a primary residence.
We have a process of a 1-year temporary use permit that gives that individual 1 year to decide what they want to do on that property while they make improvements or build. And then at the point in time that we get to the end of that 12-month time frame, that individual can come before the board and request an extension of that 12-month period.
Did that answer your question, ma'am?
That, yes, but what if they never intend to build on it? Can they get a permit? What if their intention is to never build on that property? They just want a temporary RV, and they can't give you the documentation that they have.
If you're going to get an RV, I think you need to put the improvements in on the property, because you either know if you get the 1-year temporary use permit, I think everybody's got a kind of an idea of whether they want to build on the property or not. I mean, you kind of already will know whether you want to live in Suwannee County or not. You can get that 1-year temporary use permit. You're going to have to do those improvements, but it gives you the opportunity, even if you can't demonstrate a primary residence elsewhere. I mean, for situations like that, we have some pretty nice campgrounds in our community, and if you need just a month or 2 to tide you over, it's really inexpensive to go rent a site to get that RV there, and you have a temporary location before you can make your decision.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Craig.
Just kind of what she's asking though, Ronald. If they don't know their intentions, like let's just say they don't, but they do make those improvements like you're saying. I mean, obviously I think in the long run it does enhance that property because now it's already got those improvements. So if they choose to move and sell, then I think that would just be an added bonus to that property at that point in time. But
That's all lovely, but if they don't know, he's saying go to an RV park, you can't use your property. If you don't.
No, he's saying you can use
do it for a year.
You can do
at
it for a
least.
year.
Give them time to figure out what they want to do.
No.
No.
The
not on that
recreational permit.
But you said to get a recreational permit, you have to have a residence.
There's 2 different
That's
kinds.
the recreational permit. There is another permit, which is a 1-year temporary use permit that allows you to secure the permit while you make improvements or build on the property. It is not related to establishing a primary residence elsewhere. That's a separate permit. That permit is not under discussion. That permit exists today. You can come get that building permit tomorrow if you need to.
Not on that one.
Not on that one.
Temporary use
No,
permit.
ma'am.
Not on that one.
No, ma'am.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, I know this gentleman wants to speak, but before we go to him, the only thing that I'm torn about a little bit is on that number 3, that building the structure when not in use. I mean, I see both sides of that, and I'll give it I'll give a couple examples. River lots. I mean, if the folks own a river lot and it's in a flood zone, I don't want to build a structure in a flood zone. It's going to flood.
It needs to be open because I think it states you have to have flowing water through it.
But even if it wasn't on the river, I mean, I don't want to have a $20,000 or $10,000 RV that I come stay on my 120-acre tract, and when I'm not using my $10,000 camper to stay 6 months out of the year or 6 days out of the year, I don't want to have to put it in a $50,000 barn. I'd rather just buy another $5,000 camper.
I'm going to tell you this. If you got a $10,000 RV and you don't put a shelter over it, you ain't going to be staying in it very long.
Yeah, but I mean, I would love to be able to put one over mine, and I've priced a pole barn. I can't even afford one.
But on the flip side of that, I live in Louisville. I got I got one in my backyard that just moved in. They took a 40-acre piece, they busted it up into 4 10s, and there's RVs out there now. So do I like looking at those sitting out there with generators running every night? No. Would it look better underneath a shelter? And probably, but is it my right to tell that guy that he's got to build a shelter as a government official? I don't know that that's my right. You know,
Did all 4 of them go get a permit to start with?
Yeah,
I'm just-
it's a topic for discussion. It's a starting point. I mean, if you guys don't like that language, we can certainly eliminate that language. We've not even generated the application for any text amendment. We just kind of wanted to have the direction that this board was looking at and moving forward with that.
Well, why don't we leave the structure off? We can always come back later
Correct.
and add it if we wanted to, could
Yes.
we not?
Yes,
Well,
we
let's
can.
just not do that.
Mr. Chairman.
I'm just speaking for me now.
Mr. Chairman.
No, I agree with that.
I'm kind of like Mr. Meeks is, because in my field out there, I see more people that come and I pour slabs for them or either put barns or for them. They want to put their RV inside of a enclosed, well, not necessarily completely enclosed, but have a shed top of it to protect those pull behind those fifth wheel ones or other one they want to shelter them. So
I would say majority of the people
Right,
who secure
yeah.
the recreational permits actually, come back and do some type of pole barn or some slab associated with that. That's very common, which means that they can still do that, but we're not going to mandate it.
Yeah.
If we want to delete that language, we'll start at that point. If the board decides they want to change and go a different route at a later date, we'll do that as well.
And I can, Mr. Chairman, I can tell you the reason why they do it, being a RV owner, is if you don't get those, the roof coated yearly, which is about $500, they just don't last. So these folks have figured that out and they cover them, because the sun here in Florida and the rain and things we have, it doesn't take long to create a leak on an RV sometimes. So I understand the reason for doing it. Just protects their investment. What it does.
So I think we've got a
Yep.
consensus. We're
Yeah,
not
we
going
just
to worry
leave it
about
That's fine.
the building.
J.R. Morrell, 1259 72nd Terrace, Live Oak, Florida. A couple things, there's some pros and cons, Mr. Meek said, and by looking at the pictures, Mr. Perkins,
Yes, sir.
fellow builder, how are you, sir? I got some concerns. I got some friends that want to move up here, buy property. They want to come put an RV, but they want to come hunting. So now we're going to tell this man he's got to go ahead and build a shelter and all this stuff, which I think y'all just eliminated that. The other thing is, full-time RVers have to have a domicile. Doesn't mean that they're going to stay right here in Suwannee County and be a permanent resident. But they do have to have a permanent resident. What that means is the state of Florida has a $430 million a year RV tourist state. Texas is 500 or whatever it is, and California is probably about 800 million. I don't know about y'all, maybe some of these other folks. You got people out here that are starving. Starving. You got a full-time job? You got a full-time job? So on, so on, so on. I do too. But I know people out here when I go by with my church, and I got to give them food to eat because they cannot find a job, number one. Number two, they can't afford the rent. Number three is they don't have money to put in the gas to get to where they're going back and forth. That's not none of our fault. But if we keep going like we are and going ahead and saying, well, we're just going to tax them, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, blah, 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 so on and so forth. For me, I'm going to find a job. I don't care if I got to come and wash your car for $2. I'm going to find a job and I'm going to eat. I don't think anyone in here, unless you've gone without eating, really know. I've gone 7 days without eating before. 7 days. And when you get 7 days without eating, I don't care what you've got up there. I'll break into your house. I'll go to your grandma's. I'll go to your grandpa's. I'll go wherever because I got to eat. And I don't want y'all to get into the habit of overreaching for these people that can't afford it. I understand we got to have regulations, we got to have growth, we got to have all this. But in the meantime, we have to find that common ground. I don't think by
sitting here saying that we're going to implement this, because if this person's coming to live here, he might be trying to get away from what we all despise. Because we kind of grew up in the woods probably, or whatever, grandma, grandpa's house, going to church, same old thing. Some of them folks come here, they ain't never been to grandma's church. They haven't never been to grandma's house. They're running from something to get to where they can find something. And I think that we need to take into consideration when we're thinking about this. Number one, y'all sat up here and said a Pledge of Allegiance, right? To the United States of America, correct? All of us in the room did? We cannot afford to leave one person behind, whether you like it, whether you like to look at it, whether you don't. That person still has to have the right to be able to build and live wherever they want to live at. Trust me, Mr. Hale, I think you got a phone call on your phone today from me, correct? Didn't have nothing to do with any of this. And you know what the situation is. We talked about it once before. I know where there's a house, sewage is running out on the ground. They don't have lights half the time. Dogs come down and they tear my dogs up and everything else half the time, and I'm having to call someone. We sitting up here thinking about people coming with $20, $40, $50, $100, $200,000. There's $200,000 RVs out there, in case y'all didn't know. I don't mean a bus. I mean a pull-behind RV for $278,000. And I understand that guy might want to put it in the shelter. But like you said, what about that $15,000 guy or $22,000 guy? He might not have that money to buy the shelter, but he still wants to have an RV to take his kids and go on a vacation. Doesn't mean he's got to put it in a shelter. He just wants to put it in the backyard. But come this weekend or next weekend, I want to load my kids up and go on a vacation. I want to get away from the hustle and bustle for 2-3 days that he can afford to go. Not 2 weeks like some of us take.
Sir, where do you think we're overreaching at?
I don't think you're overreaching. I think you got to find a common ground.
So that's what I'm asking. I want your opinion on what you think.
I don't have the answer. I wish I did. But I don't think telling someone when they move here that, okay, if you're going to do this, you got to have this permit, you got to have that permit, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. You got to have permits in place. I understand that. I get that. But you cannot sit here. You got to think about the guy that can afford to do some of this stuff too.
Well, and I understand that, and that's why we kind of wiped the shelter thing off here. But I'm just asking you, do you think $300 for a permit is too much, or?
No, I don't think that's too much. But I think that's a lot better than $360.
Oh, well, that's kind of where I'm going with this.
That's what I'm saying. I mean,
I want to get what you're thinking here.
That's what I'm saying.
I'm not trying to pin you down, and I'm not trying to make an example out of you. I just want to know what your thoughts are.
I'm just a nobody. That's how I am.
Well, everybody's somebody.
This is an intelligent man right here. I've had a lot of conversations with him.
Well, that's when I figured that. That's why I wanted to hear where his point is here.
I think that you got to have something where that these folks can afford to do it, that they can afford to pay. But you sitting here telling someone, okay, 90 days, I understand it's a little excessive when you get out past 90 days. I understand that. But all of a sudden you're going from, okay, we're going to double it to you. If the man ain't paid you in 90 days, you think by doubling it, he's going to pay it to you? No, he don't have the money. So you got to come up with something. Hey, maybe we need to implement a payment plan for you. Because I'm going to tell you, sometimes I'd rather pay a payment plan than go out and say, hey, I got to pay for this all outright.
Well,
so.
And I know it's a temporary, here's where I'm coming at. It's a temporary permit, so you're only allowed to stay there for 6 months.
Right.
So if you got the money to have an RV for a temporary use for 6 months.
But what about the guy that don't have the RV for temporary use? What if that has to be his permanent use?
I think
Florida statute doesn't allow that to happen.
Well, that can't happen.
I understand Florida statutes doesn't allow it to happen, but you got to come to the real world. And the time that we're in is, probably, I think the statistic, I think, is 40%. I think we're almost at half. 40% are living in RVs. Because if you come here to Suwannee County, I own a house. You own one. Probably everyone in here. We ain't having to go look for rent. Oh, wait a minute. There ain't no house to rent. And then when there is, I don't have $3,800 to go put down to rent it. I do. I do.
I understand where you're coming from
You
there.
follow me?
I get that.
So there's got to
But-
be something where,
Where do you got to be fair.
yeah,
You
you
got
fair.
people that's paying, so
I understand that.
where do you do that?
That I don't have the clue. I don't have the answer for that. I wish I did. If I did, I wouldn't be here today. But Mr. Perkins, out there building, it's just like this. You call someone, I ain't more concerned about that because that's not what I was here for. I was here about the RV park because I've called you a couple times and I got a piece of property that I'm trying to figure out what to do that I bought. And I'm trying to figure out, I don't have $1 million to go put the infrastructure in up front to do the roads and all. Now I can put, supposedly it's zoned RS2 where I can put 2 houses if it perks out and all this stuff and everything's good. But you got to have $1 million up front to go ahead and put the roads and the infrastructure and all that. So now I'm stuck. Okay, well, maybe I'll try to do an RV park because where the property is, there's one out there, but it's so run down half the time. You can't get in there, and half the other half you can't get in there because it's full. I'm like, well, but if you go with this within a 5-mile rule or whatever it is, I'm within that, so now what do I do with my property? So I just bought a piece of property and just said, oh, okay, well, I've got a piece of property. It's good for me to pay the taxes on it and just look at it, I can't build on it, can't do nothing on it. It kind of makes people think, well, why should I go and, like the lady said, buy this piece of property, try to help out. I want to come to Suwannee County. I've been here 25 years, I want to come to Suwannee County. I love Suwannee County. I love Suwannee County. I love when, y'all all know, you used to come through town, you get off the interstate, you can look from one end to the other. And I told my sister down south, and people go, really? No, that ain't no joke. Literally, you can look from one end to the other. You can look right through town, and there ain't no cars, no nothing. I love that. It ain't that way no more. So I just think that there needs to be some common ground when y'all are taking the considerations and everything. Don't think about, oh, we just got to jump on this and pass it. Start thinking in your mind, really, honestly, really self-check what we're doing, where we're going. And I know there has to be, and I know Mr. Meek's got a tough job. I wouldn't want it because I'm one of the ones to call up there and probably pester him, and I call you. I don't want to do that.
Mr. Chairman.
We talk about this,
Mr. Land.
yes, sir. But the other thing is, when they're going to build this kind of stuff, how backed up are you? I think I called you about a job, and I ain't got an answer from you yet, have I?
Well, I was at that.
Okay, right, you was down there, but what I'm saying is, you was busy, right? It ain't like you just pick up the phone and say, I'm gonna get a builder out here, I'm gonna do this. It ain't that easy anymore, because everybody is so busy. You want concrete? It might be a month before I get to you, 2 months. You want me to come put your door in? It might be 6 weeks. So that person that's still within that window, he might be trying to follow the rules, but there's got to be, you know what I'm saying? There's some setbacks that come into play that he just can't get there. Not that he don't want to get there, he just can't.
Ms. Murrah, right?
Yes,
Mr.
Morrell.
I mean, I agree with you with most of what you're saying. The unfortunate part for us up here is there's a fine line, and I agree with you on property rights. But the flip side of that is not overreaching too much on your property rights, but somewhere in the middle there, we got to protect the property rights of the guy next door.
Well, then maybe he should have bought my property. You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying.
I'm sure hindsight
I get where you're
2020, I'd
going
have
with
bought the
this.
40 acres
Yes.
behind me if I'd have known what was coming.
I got
but
you.
I didn't. And hindsight's always 2020 with all of us.
I get that.
So the unfortunate part for us is where's that fine line of not overstepping on your individual property rights, but protecting your neighbors so that you don't drag in 5 of those $500 campers we talked about and set up not an RV park, but a permanent resident trailer park or mobile home
Village.
park. That turns into you're charging all these guys $100 a month and they're there full time year round.
Yeah.
And I didn't sign up to live next door to that. But if we don't put some language in here that puts some guidelines in there to somewhat try to restrict that, so now I'm stepping on your property
I'm
rights,
not
but I'm trying
against
to
that.
protect the guy next door.
I'm not
Where's the
against
middle?
that. I'm just saying that when y'all start drawing this up, because I'm gonna tell you, you're gonna be over at the
understand.
Coliseum, and then you're gonna have my rights, and then you're going to go into domicile, and then you're going to go into a bunch of other stuff, and you might open some worms that you can't put back in the can.
I understand.
And I just want to make sure y'all prepared for it. Me, when I get out here tonight, y'all probably won't see me again for a while. But I'm just saying, I think that when y'all do this, you need to make sure that y'all really think about what's going on. I'm not saying it don't need to be implemented. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, I'm still trying to figure out how come we don't have a noise ordinance. Because I got people saying like you that, 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm trying to get up 5 o'clock to drive to work, and, I'm up at 3 o'clock, not because I'm on the court, but that's my thought.
We appreciate your comments. We're going to have to move along.
Yeah, I will say, Mr. Chairman, just one thing he said. I think Robin spoke to this a while ago about those timelines not being in stone. He works with those guys and gives them adequate timing and things of that nature. Wouldn't you guys agree with that?
May I say one thing? I forgot earlier. It was suggested, Steel Moses Klepper, it was suggested doing annual renewals. I was sitting back there thinking maybe y'all could think about semi-annual. The endless right to have that, I could see where that'd be a problem Gypsy set in, but maybe consider semi-annual.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, I'll be very quick. My name's Lynn Touchton, 8837 185th Road here in Live Oak. I farmed this area for over 35 years, and this is more personal than anything. We as farmers implement best management practices, and we're trying to be good stewards of the land, and I ask you all 5 to do the same thing when you're considering this with RVs. Mr. Crespo said there's over 1,300 miles of roads. That's paved roads and county maintained roads. You still got to consider all the little places and paths and traces that have these little nooks and crannies where these RVs are tucked away with no improvements. That has to be enforced. I think you need to put an impact fee on an RV. When you bring an RV in here, pay an impact fee. That helps you with enforcement process. It also helps with law enforcement. Law enforcement is something that's going to be added the burden with all these new RVs moving in. This may be a way to help pay for that, pay for the code enforcement to maintain these current RV stickers, and go along with that. When you buy your license plate for your vehicle, you don't have it prorated. It's from your birth date to the birth date. Your RV permit should be just a flat fee. That'll help with enforcement. You don't have to have the girls figure out prorating and all that. When, like I said, I buy a trailer, if it's midstream in the year, my birthday is September, I pay whatever the tag fee is. The other problem is when someone buys a lot, improves it, puts their RV on it, gets everything permitted and legal, then they turn around and say, well, hey, Suwannee County isn't where I want to be, and they sell it. Mr. Jones buys it, all he's got to do is put the power on, he can do anything he wants there. You have to think of something maybe to implement if you had an RV permit for that property and you chose to leave and sell it. Maybe something that he has to do to get the power turned on to follow best management practices. And also in other counties, I know when they've had fines, when I was in code enforcement, they would attach them to their tax bill. They will pay their tax bill, otherwise they're sold for tax certificates. And people that fail to pay the fines, I know other counties have done that. They've attached it to their tax bill. And it's just a few little things, food for thought. And like I said, it's going to be a mess to enforce. And you've got to have a way and a means and a monetary figure to enforce this violators, because there's a lot out there. And that's all I got to say to y'all. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Just a quick thought. We did give a little bit of thought behind situations where properties do sell. So you do have an individual who secures an RV permit somewhere in the middle of that year, they sell that property. Then the new owner's subject to the renewal at the first of the year. You know what I mean? So it may be dealing with a different person, but that permit's always associated with that property. So that parcel number is not going to change. It's always going to go with that property. So if the ownership of that property changes, we'll be able to verify that. So any notice that comes after that, we know the right person to send that to.
So it's my understanding we're going to strike the language for the enclosed building.
I say yes.
Yes.
Any other on 1 through 9 here that we're looking at and the fee, is this good for them to put something together, or somebody got something else to say about any of these?
You going with the $300?
It's the one I got.
I would like to start with that.
Yes, sir.
So that permit fee be $300?
300, are y'all good with that?
Yes, sir.
Frank, got a question. On number 3, you're not striking the occupancy.
No.
No, just the requirement for the enclosed building. I think we got a plan here.
I appreciate it. We'll,
So is that saying it has to be removed from the property as well, or we can leave it on the property?
it's not saying it's got to be removed. The
Yes.
occupancy is limited to 6 months in a calendar year. We did have some internal discussion of that. If you put a requirement in there, going back to that thing, if we adopt some language, it needs to be reasonable that it can be enforced.
Yeah.
So if we're out there doing inspections on the initial permit, if we got requirements that you got to remove it for a certain amount of time, there was another county that I seen that had stated that before you come in and renew your permit, you have to remove your RV for 180 consecutive days. Well, that means we got to send somebody out there to check and see if your RV is removed. And it might be removed for 30 days, but then you're going to go back out in there 30 days after that and check and see if it's still removed. It would really be a situation that's hard for us to enforce.
Yeah, I was just asking, man.
Yeah, but I'm glad you brought that up because we did have some discussion with that of like, can we have people remove these off of their property and then be able to prove that they're limiting that 6 months? And it just puts another layer of follow-up and inspection that we just can't do.
Well, and the people that are bad actors are just going to be bad actors. I mean, let's face it, the people that's going to do it the right way, you're not going to have a problem with them. It's going to be the people that never intended on doing the right thing anyway, most of the time, so.
We always get we get the complaints. You're going to continue to get that. And it's not to say you're not going to have somebody that tries to exceed that occupancy more than 6 months in the calendar year. But as soon as the neighbor calls and complains, and that person is basically testifying to the fact that I'm home every day and I see the person across the street, they've come out that front door of that RV for the past 3 years every day. That person's an actual factual witness at that point in time, and we can go that route if we need to. But we there's a lot to be said about where the complaints generate from.
And I think we decided that we were going to use, whenever we adopt this, language will be from that point forward. Anybody else before that would be grandfathered in unless violated and had to come back for a new permit.
Correct.
So just want to make that clear. Mr. Pravat, is there anything you need to add to this conversation?
Mr. Chairman, from the standpoint of having the outline here, and Mr. Meeks and I had already talked about, straightening out the definitions and stuff like that, so I'm fine.
Mr. Administrator?
One thought on your fees is, I'm a firm believer that a fee should be based on what it costs to operate, so that my taxes don't reflect somebody else's use. So that, we need to be self-sufficient as best we can. I mean, some things we can't, but just as a general rule, the fee should be based on what it costs us to operate, so that we don't have to prop up that from our other tax base.
Well, and I kind of agree that I, as a homeowner, I don't want to have to pay for RV permits, you know what I mean, and enforcing it. So, yeah, I think it should be self-paying.
One thing that you're going to see, we felt like, and that's why I put two options in there. Was trying to give a round figure we can look at with dealing with that. And it is just increasing that fee $50. But what we will have, we've never had before, is an annual renewal behind that. So any subsequent follow-up inspections, will cover for that employee, will cover for that fuel, will cover, those cost of mailings and things like that. So I know that
Well, it can always be adjusted. We'll run with it and see.
Right, yeah, and, I know that, the building department's an enterprise fund, so they fund themselves off of permit fees and everything like this, so it will help that situation there. Can't really speak to my knowledge on the code enforcement budget. I don't know where those funds, if part of those funds are coming from the building department side or whether part of it comes from general revenue. But, that's something the board can decide at some point in time in the future, whether you want to take some of those funds from the renewal side to help fund some of the needs on the code enforcement side. So it's not an impact immediately to us, but there is a way to increase that budget by the fees that we actually collect.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir, Mr. Perkins.
I know doing it back in the days of Senator Grinnell and Barbara Brown. You smile about it. But,
you aging yourself, Mr. Perkins.
Yes, sir. Back in that code enforcement board during that time. There was a fee was charged for every picture taken, their trips out, and the thing that they're incurred doing that trip out to that property. Or that's still being done.
Yes, sir. We have, like I said, we bring the issues to the code enforcement magistrate. So part of that is the cost of prosecution fees that we have that our magistrate, Mr. Schutte, would put. And whether that's a fine for the actual violation, separate from that would be the cost of prosecution, which they have to pay separately, So we do that. Yes, sir.
And going back to the RV parks and stuff, we're just going to bring back some more information. You're going to check with some other counties and
I kind of got a little bit of idea if I can get a little bit more detailed list of some things and not really try to kill it and overthink it, but just really look at, I kind of wanted to gauge the level of concern from the board and see if we're talking about areas of limitation for certain roads, creating separations between those. If we want to go there, I think that there's some language out there. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. I think that we can put a reasonable list together and bring something back before the board.
If you're going to move, excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
If you're going to move forward with, considering the densities and things like that, there's several provisions that are out there may not be aware of in the Florida Administrative Code that deal with the campgrounds themselves and also basis, and a lot of them are based on the health department rules because of that.
Mr. Land, you want to say something?
Yeah, I'm still riding the horse of turning the campgrounds into a special permit over a special exception. I don't know how we get there, but, like Mr. Meeks was there was a very controversial one come up in my district just last month, and City Hall was, literally standing room only, and it just, in opposition of it. And I personally, I just feel like, no disrespect whatsoever to the zoning board members, but they're all volunteers, and they were catching a lot of heat that night on a volunteer basis. I hear it all the time. That's why you make the big bucks, so with it affecting, not that we do.
Mr. Chairman?
No.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Just a little history on that, Mr. Land. And moving things from the zoning board. It became a period of time back in the 90s where chicken houses became the issue. Originally, chicken houses were under that special exception area then. And because just what you're talking about right now, especially with the board members being volunteers and something like that taking the heat and somebody really having to take the heat, they did move the chicken houses and now they're special permits. And that would be the easier process to jump on first if you're going to, to do that. And then as we roll down through with the RV side of it, the campground side of it, later on, we can always come back to that.
Yeah, that's, and it's not just taking the heat, but a campground of any magnitude, especially one that's 50-something units, that affects that whole community. And there were folks reaching out to me, and I'm like, I can't do anything.
Yeah, and the issue a lot with that was, with the chicken houses are, about the buffering and about the setbacks and those types of things. So, making sure that they comply with that. The zoning board members, would do that. But again, the board at that particular time felt that, that is something that affects not just your neighbor, not just whatever, but it affected, the area of the community around there, and therefore it should have been an issue that would come before the board here. So there's precedent for doing it.
Good.
Yeah, I think there was, like I said, the climate and atmosphere always change. Up until just a couple of years ago, RV parks and campgrounds were not an issue in our county. So, they may have been non-existent in the applications coming before board. They are a very popular topic. Since the board has adopted the moratorium, I've received several phone calls regarding it. So I can gauge that level of interest of where they want to locate. But, in doing that, I also see some issues with sometimes where they want to locate. Sometimes they're in the middle of nowhere. And it's just like you wonder what would be bringing a person to that point. It's not a destination point. It's not that somebody's coming there to enjoy the river or the springs because it's not conveniently located near that.
It's in the middle of a cow pasture.
Right. So it's like we're
But the reason, though, we've run into this, I've seen it, people may just get together, have a bluegrass get-together. Some people get together for an archery weekend or whatever. I've seen it all out there in a few years, and you and I have dealt with some of this over the past. But, I do think we need to hone in on that and sharpen the pencil on it. But
Yeah, I would just like to see those projects of that magnitude, that's going to affect not just the joining landowner, but that whole community, come back to the board so that, one, we take the heat off the zoning board, but two, we have a little more say in the matter on that, the LDRs and whatnot that we set forth are being followed.
And we can set
Not that they don't, but-
and we can set that criteria, and we can switch that over to a special permit. And then the points in the land development regulations that the board has to look at in making approvals for special permits, there's like 16 points in there, and one of those issues, even though it's a special permit, doesn't always mean that it has to be approved. You know what I mean? Because one of those points that sticks out a lot in there is the impact of the scale of need of that use to the community or neighborhood. So even though someone makes the application, you may recognize that there's really not a need or a demand for that use in a specific community or neighborhood, and it may be better suited for another location. You know what I mean? So in situations like that, the board ultimately has the ultimate authority to approve or disapprove anything like that.
So as far as a time frame on the RV permit, special permit for the RVs or the temporary permit, what are we looking at?
As far as the language, you have no issues with the language that we've proposed. We can get with Mr. Pravat and come up with definition language. Like I said, shouldn't be bad. If that's done within a reasonable amount of time in the next couple of weeks, I can have the application before the Planning and Zoning Board at our January meeting, and then bring that before the commission in February. I said at worst case scenario, I'd have to look at the time of when the moratorium expires. I think it's somewhere towards the end of February, but at worst case scenario, I could have it before the commission for adoption first part of March. So we may have an overlap of maybe a week or so, but just depending upon when the public hearings line up, I just want to make sure we have enough time for advertising.
But we'll have, because of the meeting, the P&Z meeting is after our first meeting in January. So we can actually have a shot at you looking at it and then putting in the application, for January.
Correct. And then even if it comes before you at the first hearing and you see something in there that you're really just not sitting well with you, and you want us to strike or change or modify that language, we still have time before it comes back before you as an adoption. So there's going to be ample opportunity to get everybody on
Yeah,
board.
I would just say expedite.
I'm ready to move forward with it for sure. Yes, sir.
We'll do it.
Anything else?
I just want to say I appreciate the opportunity you guys gave us.
Thank all y'all. Thank you.
I just want to tell you it was a great presentation, a lot of information, well put together, well thought out. Really appreciate it. It's nice to come and have it laid out, with all the points to it. It was really nice.
We appreciate it. I know Robin, kind of like I said before, kind of sits in his wheelhouse. He spent a lot of time in preparation of that presentation. I'm really proud of the work that he done. Can't say enough about that.
Absolutely good
Thanks,
job.
Rob.
Robin did a great job. I mean, I tell you, him going out there to people's houses, I know those past corner officers, they been into a lot of doozers. I mean, their lives been threatened and guns pulled at them, and, you know, if anything happened, you may want to get you a body camera or something. It's bad out there.
I tried to tell him when he started it was going to be a requirement.
I like the body camera
I see why he
thing.
wear that. I see why he wear that vest. He needs that vest.
I told him when he started it was going to be a requirement. When he showed up at one of these code enforcement complaints, he had to kick the door open with that long cigarette hanging out of his mouth. He didn't.
Mr. Scott.
I just want to say I appreciate, you see an example of quality staff and doing the legwork and stuff and the support from the county attorney.
Sure.
Since I've been in this opportunity, I've noticed that with a lot of staff. I met with the public works guys today, the supervisors, great team out there. I appreciate the support I've gotten already from the administrative staff. We're going to move forward with that. But it just shows you an example of what we got, and I'm proud of those guys, what they did tonight, but other guys back at the other locations too. But
Absolutely.
and we'll be working with code enforcement and others on the budget for safety and training. That's critical. We've got to do that and move forward with those. So, but we'll be working on that as we go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And seeing nothing, do I have Mr. Meeks, anything else?
I'm good.
We
Move to
good?
adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Land, second by Commissioner Perkins. All in favor, aye? Aye. Y'all better hang on to these books.
Be able to send by you.